Two ranchers. One disputed creek. A valley on the brink of war. And a ruthless organization secretly engineering the bloodshed. Chapter 1. Zack Ledlie held the Winchester across his lap, fingers tracing the worn stock where 30 years of sunlight had bleached the wood pale. The rifle hadn't fired at a man since '92, when the rustlers came through Windy River Valley thinking two aging ranchers would roll over. You remember that? Zack nodded at the shotgun chaps hanging on the wall, stiff with ancient blood. Mace Baxter followed his gaze. Turner had him dead to rights at 200 yards. 500. The hell it was. I paced it after. Zack set the rifle aside and lifted his whiskey. 500 and change. Mace drank, said nothing. The leather chair creaked under his weight. Outside, the afternoon sun hammered the Lazy L ranch house, turning the air thick and still. Got a letter from that bank in Denver, Zack said. Wanting to know my interest in selling. Which bank? First Territorial. They wrote me too. Mace set his glass on the side table. Hank Sneed's been around again. Third time this month. That land speculator. Calls himself a developer now. Says he's got Eastern money looking to invest. Cattle prices what they are. He figures we're ready to pack it in. Zack looked at his friend. They'd ridden together since before the valley had a name. Back when Comanche still held the high country, and every water source got paid for in blood. Mace had gone gray first, but Zack's face carried more scars. You thinking about it? No. Mace pulled a cigar from his vest. You? No. They sat in the silence that comes from knowing a man 30 years. The kind where nothing needs saying. Zack's mind drifted to his son. Jeff would have been 23 now, old enough to take over the Lazy L, young enough to still think he knew everything. The Diamondback had crawled into his bedroll 2 summers back, and they'd found him at dawn already cold. Mary had been gone 23 years before that. Cancer took her slow, and Zack had watched every day of it. The ranch felt large now. Empty. Sneed said something about the water table dropping, Mace said. Claimed he had survey reports. Survey reports. Zack snorted. Kaw Creek never ran dry in living memory. That's what I told him. Man's a snake. Won't argue that. Boot heels sounded in the hallway. The door swung open, and Bernita Baxter walked in, pulling off her riding gloves. Dust covered her from hat to boots, and she wore men's range clothes like she'd been born to them. Still trading war stories? She hung her hat on the rack. I thought you two would have run out by now. We were discussing business, Mace said. Sneed. How'd you know? He stopped me on the road. Wanted to know if I might convince my father to consider his generous offer. She made the last part sound like a curse. I told him where he could put his offer. Zack laughed. That's my goddaughter. He's persistent, I'll give him that. Bernita crossed to the window. Saw 3 of his men surveying near the north section yesterday. When I asked what they were doing, they said checking fence lines. On my land. Claimed it was county easement. Mace stood. I'll ride over there tomorrow, and... The gunshot cracked sharp across the valley. Zack was on his feet, Winchester in hand before the echo faded. Mace already had his Colt out, moving toward the door. Bernita stayed at the window. Rider coming in hard, she said. 1 horse, no pursuit I can see. They stepped onto the porch. Heat rolled off the packed earth. A horseman tore down the slope, bent low in the saddle, dust plumes streaming behind. His right hand held a Colt, but he kept looking back over his shoulder. You know him? Mace asked. No. The rider wheeled toward the corral, a big round pen with 8-foot rails. He hit the ground running, reached for the catch rope hanging on the gatepost. "Hey." Zack brought the Winchester up. "That's far enough." The young man turned. Early 20s, lean as a whip, with eyes that calculated distances. He'd been running hard, but his breathing came steady. His hand moved toward the holstered Colt. Zack fired. Dust jumped between the stranger's boots. The young man's hands came up empty. They closed the distance fast, Zack keeping the rifle centered on the stranger's chest while Mace circled right, cutting off any escape toward the horses. Bernita hung back, but her hand rested on the small revolver she carried. "Stealing horses now." Zack kept his voice level. "Awful young for it." "Not stealing. Trading." The young man's voice carried an edge, like he'd already decided how this would go, and didn't much care for it. "Mine's used up. Got rustlers on my trail." "Rustlers?" Mace spat the word. "Where?" "We're Skyland, 2 minutes ago." Bernita moved to where she could see the ridge line. 6 riders. "They've stopped. Now they're turning back," the young man said. "Figure they saw the ranch house, decided it wasn't worth it." "Worth what?" Zack lowered the rifle an inch. "What did you do to them?" "Killed 2 of their friends. They killed mine first." Mace studied the young man's horse. He walked over, ran a hand down the animal's neck, checked its legs. "This horse isn't blown. Got plenty left. Didn't know how far to town. Couldn't risk it." 3 miles to Lone Cedar," Mace said. "Straight shot." The young man's jaw worked. He looked at the horse, then at Zack. "My mistake then." "You got a name?" Zack asked. "Rip Campbell." "Where you from, Rip Campbell?" "Alamo County. Brought 60 head of whiteface up this way, looking for decent graze. Found a gulch about 10 miles north. Rustlers hit us at dawn." Zack felt something shift in his chest. A young man alone with a small herd, trying to make his start. Just like he'd been once. Just like Jeff might have been. "How old are you?" 21. "My son would have been about your age." Mace shot Zack a look but said nothing. Rip Campbell met Zack's eyes. "I feel low about the horse. Wasn't thinking straight after watching them gun down Jerry. That was my hired man." "You said you killed 2 of them?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Zack lowered the Winchester. "I'll get some men together. We'll ride back to that gulch, see about your cattle." "Just like that." "You got a problem with help?" "No, sir." Mace's voice came hard. "I got a problem with it. We don't know this man from Adam. Could be he killed his partner himself, stole the cattle, and now he's spinning stories." Zack turned. "That what you think?" "I think it's damned convenient." The 2 old ranchers stared at each other while the sun beat down, and the stranger stood with his hands still raised, watching something break apart that had been solid for 30 years. Chapter 2. 3 lazy L-hands came in from the North Range, trailing dust and questions. Pete Quinlan, the foreman, swung down first. He wore Angora chaps, and had the build of a man who'd spent 40 years in the saddle. "Heard shooting," Quinlan said. "We got company." Zack gestured at Rip Campbell. "Says rustlers hit his herd up in Tortilla Gulch. Killed his partner." Quinlan looked Rip over the way a man examines a horse he's thinking about buying. "You trust him?" "I do." "I don't." Mace hadn't holstered his Colt. "Story's got more holes than a rotted fence." "What holes?" Bernita asked. "His horse isn't winded. He claims he didn't know the distance to town, but Lone Cedar's the only settlement for 50 miles. Any man driving cattle through here would know that." Rip lowered his hands. "I came up from the south. Never saw the town. Bull. Mace pointed his pistol at the ground. South route passes right through Lone Cedar's Main Street. We circled it. Heard there was trouble between homesteaders and ranchers. Didn't want to get caught in the middle. Quinlan spat tobacco juice. He's got an answer for everything. Let me see your bill of sale, Mace said. Rip's hand went to his vest pocket, came out with a folded paper. Mace snatched it, smoothed it flat. His eyes scanned the document. Diamond M brand. 60 head purchased in Alamo County 2 months back. Mace held the paper up to the light. Could be forged. Could be real, Zack said. Could be he killed the real Rip Campbell and took his papers. That's quite a theory. It's a theory that keeps us breathing. Zack took the bill of sale, examined it himself. The paper showed wear. The ink had that settled look of age. Seems legitimate to me. Of course it does. You want it to be. Mace turned on him. Your boy's been dead 2 years, Zack. This saddle tramp shows up with a hard luck story, and you're ready to adopt him. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Zack's face went still. When he spoke, his voice came out flat and cold. That's low, even for you. It's the truth. The truth is, a young man needs help. We used to be the kind of men who gave it. We also used to be the kind of men who stayed alive by not trusting strangers. Bernita stepped between them. Both of you stop. Right now. She looked at Rip. You said rustlers took your cattle? Yes, ma'am. How many? I counted 8. 2 dead now, if I hit what I aimed at. 6 men driving 60 head won't get far before dark, Bernita said. Not in this country. If we ride now, we can catch them at the gulch or track them if they moved on. Quinlan nodded. Girl's got a point. She's not going, Mace said. I wasn't asking permission. Mace's face colored. You'll do what I tell you. I'm 23 years old, Dad. I'll do what makes sense. She turned to Zack. If his cattle are there, he's telling the truth. If they're not, we turn him over to the sheriff. Either way, we get answers. Zack holstered his Colt. Quinlan, get 2 more men. We ride in 10 minutes. The hell we do. Mace grabbed Zack's arm. You're not thinking straight. Zack pulled free. I'm thinking fine. You're thinking with your grief. This boy could be leading us into an ambush. Then stay here. I'm going, Mace said. Somebody needs to keep you from getting killed over sentiment. Quinlan headed for the bunkhouse. The other 2 hands followed. Rip stood by the corral gate, watching the old ranchers face each other like bull elk in rut. Appreciate the help, Rip said. Both of you. Don't thank us yet, Mace told him. You show us an empty gulch, and I'll put a rope around your neck myself. They saddled up. Zack rode a big roan that had carried him through 3 range wars. Mace favored a black gelding with a white blaze. Quinlan and his men brought spare ammunition and rifles. Bernita checked her cinch twice, tightened it, swung aboard a paint mare that danced under her weight. Rip mounted his horse and took point. Tortilla Gulch is north by northwest. Hour's ride, maybe less. They set out across the valley, 7 riders in loose formation. The sun had started its fall toward the western peaks. Shadows stretched long across the bunch grass. You run cattle alone? Zack asked, pulling alongside Rip. Had Jerry with me. Good man. 60 years old if he was a day, but he could still wrangle. Where'd you know him from? Worked a drive together 3 years back. Galveston to Dodge. Long drive. It was that. Zack watched Rip's face. The young man kept his eyes forward, scanning the horizon. His right hand never strayed far from his gun. You shoot much? Zack asked. Some. Kill men before today. Rip looked at him. Is that what you're asking? Whether I've killed? It's what I'm asking. Yes. I've killed. How many? More than one. Fewer than 10. That's quite a range. It's the truth. They rode in silence. Behind them, Mace talked low to Quinlan. The foreman kept glancing at Rip's back. He doesn't trust easy, Zack said. Can't blame him. World's full of wolves. You a wolf, Rip Campbell? Used to be, maybe. Trying not to be now. Zack considered that. Fair answer. The land rose toward the gulch country, limestone breaks cutting through the prairie like knife wounds. Patches of oak and juniper clung to the slopes. A hawk circled high overhead, riding thermals. Bernita moved her paint up on Rip's other side. This partner of yours, Jerry, he have family. A sister in San Antonio. You plan to tell her? I plan to. That's good. Some men wouldn't. I'm not some men. She studied him. No. I don't think you are. Mace called out from behind. Nita, drop back here. I'm fine where I am. I said drop back. She ignored him. Rip caught the muscle working in her jaw. Your father's protective, Rip said. My father treats me like I'm 12. Could be he lost someone too. Makes a person hold tight to what's left. She looked at him different then, something shifting in her eyes. You're smarter than you look, Mr. Campbell. I'll take that as a compliment, Miss Baxter. Quinlan spurred forward, split them apart. Save the courting for later. We got company. 6 riders sat their horses on the ridge ahead. Too far to make out faces, but the silhouettes showed rifles across their saddles. They watched the lazy L group approach, then turned and disappeared over the crest. That them? Zack asked. Hard to say. Rip kept his hand near his gun. Could be. Could be a lot of things, Mace said. None of them good. They climbed the last 100 yards. The gulch opened below, a long slash in the earth with steep sides and a thin stream running through the bottom. And there, scattered across the slopes, 60 head of white-faced cattle grazed in the evening light. I'll be damned, Quinlan said. Chapter 3. They found Jerry's body a quarter-mile from the wagon, face down in the alkali dust. 2 bullets in the back. Flies had already started their work. Rip knelt beside him, removed his hat. He ran when I told him to. Should have stayed and fought. Then you'd both be dead, Quinlan said. Maybe. Zack surveyed the gulch. Spent brass littered the ground near the wagon. Blood stained the rocks where Rip claimed he'd dropped 2 rustlers. But no bodies. Their friends took them, Rip said, reading Zack's expression. Didn't want them identified. Mace climbed down from his horse, walked the perimeter. He picked up a cartridge, examined it, tossed it aside. Picked up another. These are fresh. Fired this morning. He moved to the cattle, checked their flanks. Brands clean. No sign of road wear on these animals either. I told you. 2 months from Alamo County. 100 miles, you said. Mace ran his hand over a heifer's hide. These cattle haven't been pushed that far. They're in too good a condition. We took it slow. Had time. Time and grass don't put this much fat on stock. Mace turned to Zack. He's lying about something. Zack studied the cattle himself. Mace had a point. The white faces looked too good, their coats glossy, their weight solid. Like they'd been on rich graze for months, not trailing across dry country. Maybe they found better feed than expected, Bernita said. Maybe. Mace didn't sound convinced. Or maybe these cattle came from closer than Alamo County. Rip's face stayed neutral, but his eyes went cold. You calling me a thief? I'm calling you a man with a convenient story and cattle that don't match it. The bill of sale's legitimate. Bills of sale can be forged. Brands can be altered. Dad. Bernita moved between them. Look at the ground. There was clearly a fight here. Mr. Campbell's partner is dead. Dead men make good props for a lie. Rip took a step forward. Quinlan's hand dropped to his gun. Easy, Zack said. All of you. But nobody eased. The air felt charged, like before lightning strikes. Zack looked at the dead man, at the brass casings, at the cattle. The pieces fit together, but something about the picture felt wrong. Mace sensed it too. They'd survived 30 years by trusting their instincts. Here's what we do, Zack said. Rip, you move these cattle to better graze. I've got a strip along Kaw Creek that's sitting empty. Good grass, good water. Kaw Creek. Mace's voice climbed. That's my water. It's on my land. My herd drinks from it every summer. Has for 20 years. And you're welcome to keep using it. With 60 head of his cattle there. Mace pointed at Rip. How's that supposed to work? Creeks never run dry. Won't start now. Mace's face went red. You can't do this. It's my range. It's a betrayal, is what it is. Mace grabbed Zack's arm, pulled him aside, dropped his voice. Use your head. This boy shows up with a story full of holes, and you're handing him prime grazing? He needs help. He needs investigating. Mace released him. You put him on Kaw Creek, and I'll have words about it. Words are worse. Whatever it takes. Zack's jaw set. You threaten me, Mace? I'm telling you straight. That water matters to my operation. You cut me off, and there'll be consequences. I'm not cutting you off. There's room for both herds. In a dry year? When the water holes on my range turn to mud. Mace shook his head. You're making a mistake. Worse, you're making it for the wrong reasons. What reasons are those? Jeff's been gone 2 years. You don't replace him with the first drifter who rides in. Zack hit him. A straight right that caught Mace on the jaw and sent him stumbling back 3 steps. Quinlan jumped between them. The other hand spread out, not sure whose side to take. Mace worked his jaw, spat blood. That how it is? That's how it is. Fine. Mace walked to his horse, swung up. You string wire on Kaw Creek, I'll tear it down. Come with wire cutters, and I'll come with a gun. 30 years, Zack. 30 years we've been friends. 30 years you've known me well enough not to push. Mace looked at him, something dying in his eyes. I don't know you at all anymore. He wheeled the black gelding and rode out of the gulch at a gallop. The sound of hooves echoed off the limestone walls, then faded into silence. Bernita stared after him. Uncle Zack, what just happened? Your father and I reached a disagreement. About water rights? Or about me? She turned to Rip. This is my fault. No, ma'am. It's mine. Rip picked up his hat, slapped dust from it. I should ride on. Find range somewhere else. You'll do no such thing. Zack rubbed his knuckles. I made you an offer, and I stand by it. Quinlan cleared his throat. Boss, maybe we should think this through. Mace ain't one for empty threats. Neither am I. This could turn ugly. It already has. Zack mounted his roan. Campbell, get your cattle moving. I'll have Quinlan bring fence posts and wire tomorrow. We'll mark out your section clear, so there's no confusion. You're fencing the creek? Quinlan asked. Part of it. Campbell's portion. So Baxter knows where the line is. That'll just make him madder. Can't be helped. Zack turned his horse. Wrap Jerry in a blanket and put him in the wagon. We'll see him buried proper." They worked in silence. Rip hitched the wagon team while the hands gathered the cattle. Bernita helped without speaking, but Rip caught her watching him. "I'm sorry," he said when they had a moment alone. "About your father and Zack. Not your doing." "Feels like it is." She adjusted her reins. "They've been heading for a split for years. Dad's gotten harder, less willing to bend. And Uncle Zack, after losing Jeff." She trailed off. "Maybe you're not the cause. Maybe you're just the excuse they needed. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to make you understand what you've walked into." She rode off to help move the cattle. Rip watched her go, then climbed onto the wagon seat. Behind him, wrapped in canvas, Jerry's body lay in the bed. The sun had dropped below the ridge. Long shadows filled the gulch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. Rip took up the reins and started the team forward. The cattle fell in behind, trailing south toward Kaw Creek and whatever trouble waited there. Quinlan rode up beside the wagon. "You really own these cattle, son?" "I do. But not from Alamo County." Rip looked at him. "Does it matter?" "Might. If things go sideways." "Things already went sideways. They can get worse." "Usually do." Quinlan spat. "Mace Baxter's got 40 men on his payroll. Zack's got maybe 15. Math works against us in a range war." "You think it'll come to that?" "I think two stubborn old men just drew a line neither one can cross without losing face." Quinlan pulled his hat low. "And I think you're standing right in the middle of that line." They rode in silence after that. The cattle lowed, and the wagon wheels creaked, and somewhere behind them, Mace Baxter was riding home with 30 years of friendship dead in his chest. Rip touched the gun at his hip, and wondered if he'd live long enough to regret what he'd started. He figured, probably not. Chapter 4. The fire burned low by the time the cattle settled. Rip sat on the wagon tongue, hands wrapped around a tin cup, watching the white faces graze in the moonlight. Kaw Creek ran silver through the grass, talking to itself in the dark. He'd buried Jerry at sunset, 4 feet down in hard clay. No marker. No words. Just dirt and stones to keep the coyotes out. The work had taken 2 hours and left his shoulders aching. Now the night pressed in, and Rip waited for what he knew was coming. The owl called from across the creek. 2 short hoots, 1 long. Rip set down the cup, moved back from the firelight. Stood in shadow, near the wagon wheel where he could see but not be seen. His hand stayed loose near his gun. Hoofbeats splashed through the creek. 7 riders emerged from the darkness, horses blowing, leather creaking. They pulled up 20 feet from the fire, and sat looking at the empty space where Rip had been. "Nobody around, kid?" The voice belonged to Buck Mingo. High cheekbones, black mustache, eyes like creek stones. Rip stepped into the light. "Just me, Buck." "Smart boy. Staying in the shadows." Mingo swung down, dusted his hands on his pants. "Where's your partner?" "Dead. Like we planned." "That bother you?" "Should it? Some men got soft hearts about killing." "I'm not some men." The others dismounted. 5 faces Rip knew from night camps and quick rides through dark country. Men who lived by the gun and died the same way. The 6th man was tall and ungainly, with sunken eyes that never stopped moving. Hank Sneed. Land speculator. The brains behind the operation. "I couldn't wait for you to report in town," Sneed said. He moved to the fire, held out his hands to the warmth. "Had to see for myself if you pulled it off. Cattle are here. Ledlie gave me the creek." Rip gestured at the grazing herd. He and Baxter already butted heads over the water rights. Give it a week, and they'll be shooting at each other. A week. Sneed's face twisted. That's too long. We need them at each other's throats now. Today split them. Tomorrow we pour salt in the wound. How? Baxter's water holes. We poison 2, maybe 3. Make it look like Ledlie did it out of spite. Sneed grinned. Old Mace will come at him with everything he's got. Rip watched the fire. These men have been friends 30 years. So. Seems a shame to destroy that. Buck Mingo laughed. Listen to him. Getting sentimental over a couple of old rannies he met this afternoon. They helped me. Believed my story. That was the plan. Sneed stepped closer. Don't tell me you're having second thoughts. I'm telling you, it might be worth considering. Considering what? Mercy. Sneed's voice went hard. Those 2 own the best rangeland for 100 miles. Land that's worth 10 times what they think it is. Eastern investors are buying up cattle country from here to Montana. Once Ledlie and Baxter kill each other or run each other broke, we step in and buy their spreads for pennies. Then we flip them to the real buyers for a fortune. What if they don't kill each other? Then we help them along. Sneed looked at Buck. That's why I hired professionals. Fast hoofbeats from the south cut through the night. 3 horses coming hard. Company. Buck's hand went to his gun. The other 5 scattered, moving for their mounts. Sneed froze. Who is it? How would I know? Rip walked toward the creek. Could be Lazy L riders. Maybe Ledlie himself. If they catch us here, the whole game's finished. Sneed grabbed Rip's arm. My face is known all over this valley. I can't be seen with you. The horses got louder. Close now. The wagon, Rip said. Get in the wagon. Sneed ran, climbed over the seat, disappeared into the canvas-covered bed. Buck and his men reached their horses, but the animals had wandered down to drink. The outlaws ran after them, boots slapping the ground. 3 riders burst into the firelight. One wore Angora chaps. Pete Quinlan. You're Mulhall, right? Quinlan said. He'd gotten the name wrong, but his eyes were sharp, taking in everything. I'm Quinlan. Zack's foreman. Boss sent me to bring posts and wire for the fence. At night. Wanted to get an early start. Figured to begin digging holes at first light. Quinlan looked past Rip toward the creek. Thought I saw riders heading this way. Rustlers. Same ones from before. I ran them off. Just you. Just me. Brave or stupid? Little of both, probably. Quinlan studied him. Behind the foreman, his 2 men sat their horses with rifles across their laps. Across the creek, Buck Mingo and the others had mounted up. They sat in darkness, waiting. This your wagon? Quinlan rode closer, looking at it. It is. Where's your partner buried? Quarter-mile south. Near a cottonwood. We'll check that in the morning. Make sure you're telling truth. Quinlan pulled his pistol, casual as scratching an itch. You know what I think? I think those rustlers are your friends. I think maybe one of them is hiding in this wagon right now. Rip's stomach went cold. Nobody's in the wagon. Then you won't mind if I check. Quinlan aimed his gun at the canvas cover. Come out of there, whoever you are. Hands where I can see them. Nothing. Last chance. Quinlan thumbed the hammer back. The shot came from the creek bank. Muzzle flash lit the darkness for half a heartbeat. One of Quinlan's men grunted and slid sideways off his horse, hit the ground hard. Ambush? Quinlan wheeled his horse, firing blind at the creek. His remaining man crouched low, yanking his pistol, squeezing off rounds. More shots answered. 5 guns now, maybe 6. The night exploded with sound and flame. Quinlan's horse screamed and went down. The foreman jumped clear, came up shooting. Rip dropped behind the wagon wheel, gun in hand. He could end this. Could shoot Buck and the others, save Quinlan and his men. But that would blow his cover, destroy the entire setup. He stayed low and watched. The second Lazy L rider took bullets in the chest and back. He twisted in the saddle, yelled once, toppled off his horse. The animal bolted into the darkness. Quinlan fired twice more, hit dirt, crawled toward the dead man's rifle. He grabbed it, rolled, came up on one knee. 3 bullets caught him at once. He jerked backward, dropped the rifle, tried to stand. Buck Mingo stepped out of the shadows, gun raised. No. Rip came out from behind the wheel, brought his own pistol up. He fired. The bullet took Buck's partner, a thick man named Slade, in the shoulder. Slade spun and fell. Rip swung his gun toward another shape, pulled the trigger. The man dropped. But he was too late for Quinlan. The foreman went down under the outlaw's fire, body twitching, then still. Buck turned his gun on Rip. What the hell are you doing? They were going to escape. Rip pointed at the dead Lazy L men. They would have told Ledlie everything. A boot kicked Rip sideways. He hit the ground, looked up at Hank Sneed standing over him. Don't shoot our key man. Sneed waved his arms at Buck. We need him. Buck lowered his gun, but kept it pointed in Rip's direction. He just killed 2 of my boys. They would have talked, Rip said again. He stood, brushed dirt off. No choice. You had a choice. You chose wrong. Buck. Sneed moved between them. Listen to me. Everything depends on Campbell staying in Ledlie's good graces. He's been perfect up till now. This was bad luck, that's all. Bad timing. Bad timing gets men killed. Buck gestured at Slade and the other body. Now I'm down 4 men total. We'll get more. Sneed turned to Rip. What will you tell Ledlie? The truth. Rustlers ambushed his men. I tried to help, but couldn't save them. Will he believe you? He wants to believe me. That's enough. Buck holstered his gun, but his eyes stayed hard. This goes wrong, kid. You're the first one I kill. Noted. The outlaws dragged Slade and the other dead man away from the fire. They'd dumped the bodies somewhere they wouldn't be found. The Lazy L riders they left where they fell. We're done here. Buck mounted up. Next time you need something, come to town. Don't make us come to you. Agreed. Sneed climbed on his horse, leaned down. Poison those water holes tomorrow. I'll have men watching to make sure you do it. I'll handle it. You better. Sneed kicked his horse into motion. The outlaws splashed across Kaw Creek and vanished into the night. Rip stood by the fire, looking at 3 dead men. The cattle grazed on, oblivious. The creek kept talking to itself. He'd crossed a line tonight. Killed men who wore the same brand as Zack Ledlie, men who treated him square. His hands shook. He made them stop. Dawn was 4 hours off. He had that long to figure out what story to tell and how to tell it convincingly. 4 hours to become someone he wasn't sure he wanted to be. Chapter 5. The smell hit him first. Gunpowder and cooling blood sharp in the pre-dawn air. Rip Campbell stood over the 3 bodies as the eastern sky turned from black to a bruised purple. The fire had burned down to a pile of winking coals. Kaw Creek whispered over the rocks, same as it had before the shooting, same as it would tomorrow. He righted the wagon wheel he'd hidden behind. Touched the splintered wood where a bullet had gouged a track. He looked at Pete Quinlan, whose Angora chaps were dark with his own lifeblood. The foreman's eyes were open, staring at a sky that held no answers. The other two lazy hands lay where they'd fallen, twisted into the shapes of their last moments. 3 good men. Dead because of him. Dead because he hesitated. Rip walked to the creek and plunged his hands into the cold running water. He scrubbed at his face, the motion rough, trying to wash away the sight of Quinlan going down. It didn't work. He straightened up, water dripping from his jaw, and looked at his reflection. A stranger looked back. He caught Quinlan's horse, a steady-looking bay, and tied the bodies of the 2 hands across their saddles. He couldn't lift the foreman. He wrapped him in a canvas tarp from the wagon bed, leaving him for later. He left the fence posts and coiled wire where the men had dropped them. A monument to a job that would never get started. He mounted his own horse, and leading the other 2, started the slow ride back to the Lazy L. He didn't rehearse a story. The truth, bent just enough, was always better. The sun was a sliver above the horizon when the ranch house came into view. A single lamp burned in the kitchen window. One of the hands, a man whose name Rip didn't know, was coming out of the bunkhouse. The man stopped, saw the laden horses, and his hand went to his gun. Campbell? His voice was tight. What in God's name? The back door of the main house opened, and Zack Ledlie stepped onto the porch, a cup of coffee in his hand. He saw Rip, then his eyes fixed on the canvas-wrapped shapes on the saddles. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the porch boards. Rip stopped 10 feet away. He didn't dismount. Rustlers, Rip said. His voice was a raw croak. Came back during the night. 7, maybe 8 of them. Zack walked down the steps like an old man, his face gray in the morning light. He reached out and pulled back the edge of the canvas from one of the bodies. He looked at the dead man's face, then let the canvas fall. He didn't need to see the other one. Quinlan. Zack's voice was barely a whisper. Dead. Rip gestured back the way he'd come. He's still at the creek. They ambushed them. Hit them from the dark. You were there. I was there. The other hands had gathered now, a silent circle of grim-faced men. One of them, a lanky cowboy with suspicious eyes, spoke up. How'd you manage to get out of it? I was by the wagon. They were closer to the creek. Took the first volley. Rip met the man's gaze. I shot 2 of them. Ran the rest off. You shot 2 of them, the cowboy repeated, his tone flat with disbelief. Last time you shot 2 of them as well. You're hell on rustlers, ain't you? Sam, shut your mouth, Zack said, his voice regaining its iron. He looked at Rip, his eyes searching. You're sure it was the same bunch? I'm sure. Zack stared out toward the north, toward Kaw Creek. The grief on his face hardened into something else. Something cold and brittle. They thought killing my men would scare me off. They thought wrong. He turned to the assembled hands. Get the big wagon. Hitch up a 4-horse team. We're bringing our boys home. He looked at the lanky cowboy. Sam, you and 2 others get shovels. We'll bury them next to my Jeff. He then turned back to Rip. After that, we're going back to the creek. And we're building that fence. Bernita found him by the corral an hour later. He was checking the cinch on his saddle, his movements stiff. The bodies had been brought back and laid in the barn, awaiting the digging of the graves. The women from the cookhouse were crying softly inside. He's going to get himself killed, she said without preamble. Rip didn't look at her. He kept pulling at the leather strap. Your uncle is a stubborn man. He's a grieving man. There's a difference. She stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. They were clear and sharp and saw too much. 3 men are dead. My father is talking about war. The whole valley is a powder keg, and you're the one who walked in carrying the match. I didn't want this to happen. But it did. She wasn't accusing him. It was a statement of fact, which was worse. That story you told. About the ambush. Was it true? Mostly. Which parts weren't? He finally looked at her. The parts that matter. He dropped the cinch, his shoulders slumping. This is my fault, Miss Baxter. All of it. I know that. Knowing it doesn't change anything. She looked toward the low hills that separated the Lazy L from her father's ranch. A rider went out an hour ago to tell my father about Quinlan. Do you know what he's going to do? He's not going to send his condolences. He's going to blame Zack. He's going to say, this is what happens when you trust a stranger. She was right. He knew she was. What do you want me to do? Rip asked. Right away, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Just get on your horse and don't look back. Maybe if you're gone, they'll find a way to fix this. It's too late for that. Running won't stop what's coming. Then what will? He had no answer for her. He just shook his head and turned back to his horse. Mace Baxter took the news, standing by his own fireplace. The rider from the Lazy L stood twisting his hat in his hands, eyes on the floor. Quinlan and 2 others, Mace said, tasting the words like poison. He'd known Pete Quinlan for 30 years. Played poker with him, drank with him, respected him. Yes, sir, the rider said. Campbell claims it was rustlers. Campbell. Mace spat the name. And Zack believes him? Seems to. The rider hesitated. He's fixing to build that fence on Kaw Creek. Said he's starting today. Mace stared into the fire, his big hands clenching and unclenching. It wasn't grief he felt. It was a white-hot rage that burned the grief away. Zack's sentimentality, his blind spot for that saddle tramp, had gotten good men killed. And now he was doubling down, spitting on their graves by building the very fence that started this whole damnable mess. He was dishonoring their memory. Dishonoring their 30 years of friendship. He turned to his foreman. Tell the men to saddle up. All of them. Sir, are we riding to the creek? No, Mace said, his voice like rocks grinding together. We're not fighting Zack on his land. That's a fool's game. He walked to the gun rack and took down a heavy Colt revolver, checking the load. I'll face him in town. Man to man. One of us is going to settle this for good. Chapter 6. The sun climbed, pressing the heat of a fresh hell onto their backs. Kaw Creek was a gash of green, the air above it shimmering. Rip Campbell drove the steel digging bar into the hardpan clay. The chunk of it biting earth was the only sound, over and over. Beside him, Sam, the lanky hand with suspicious eyes, shoveled loose dirt from the hole. Zack Ledlie worked 20 feet away, setting the next post, his movements stiff, methodical. 3 other hands strung wire. Nobody talked about the 3 fresh graves back at the ranch. They just worked. You're quiet today, Sam said, not looking up from the hole. Rip grunted, pulled the bar free, drove it down again. Back at the bunkhouse, Sam said, we got a pool going. That's so. Yep. On how long you last. Most of the boys say you'll be gone by sundown. I said you'd last the week. Sam leaned on his shovel. Figured a man who can kill 2 rustlers in the dark while 7 others are shooting at him. He ain't the type to run. Rip stopped. He wiped sweat from his eyes with his forearm. You got something to say, Sam. Say it. I'm saying it. Sam's eyes were flat. Pete Quinlan taught me to rope. He was a square man. He didn't die right. He was ambushed. He was. Sam gestured with his chin. And you were the only one who walked away. Just like you were the only one who walked away from your partner. Rip turned, hands loose at his sides. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you lucky. Awful lucky. Sam. Zack's voice cut across the space like a whip. You're paid to dig, not to talk. Just making conversation, boss. Make it with the shovel. Sam jammed the shovel into the dirt pile and went back to work. But his eyes stayed on Rip. The sound of a horse coming fast made them all stop. They turned, hands moving toward pistols before they saw the rider. Bernita. She rode the paint mare hard, pulling up in a spray of dust that settled on all of them. She didn't dismount. Her face was pale under the brim of her hat. She looked past Rip, straight at Zack. He's in town. Zack sighted down the line of posts he'd set. Town's open to everyone. He's at the saloon. The drover's head. Bernita's voice was tight. He's waiting for you, Uncle Zack. He sent a man to tell the whole town he's there to settle this. Zack picked up his tamping rod. Let him wait. He'll get thirsty. He's not drinking. She rode her horse a few steps closer, her gaze bouncing between the old man and Rip. He told my foreman that if you didn't come by noon, he'd come out here. He said he'd tear this fence down with his bare hands if he had to. Zack kept his back to her. He tries that, he'll be trespassing. He'll be dead. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, got it back. You'll kill him over a line in the dirt. Zack finally turned. His face was carved from old wood. He threatened me, Nita. He drew the line first. Quinlan and his boys are dead because of that line. Quinlan is dead because of him. She pointed a gloved finger at Rip. None of this was happening before he rode in. None of it. That's not fair, Zack said. Fair. She laughed, a short, ugly sound. You're going to shoot my father in the street over fair. She spurred the mare, planting it in front of Rip. He had to step back. You did this. You stood by the creek and let this happen. I didn't let it, Rip said, his voice low. Then stop it. Her eyes were desperate. You're the one who started it. You're the one who has to stop it. Rip looked at Zack, who had turned his back again, a silent, stubborn wall. He looked at Sam, who watched with a cold, satisfied smirk. He looked back at Bernita. How? Rip asked. I don't care how. Lie. Talk. Run. Anything. Just stop them. Rip stared at her for a long second. Then he threw the digging bar down. It rang against a rock. Pick it up, Zack said, not turning. Rip didn't answer. He walked to his horse, tied to a scrub oak. Where are you going, Campbell? Sam called out. Pool's closing early. Rip ignored him. He checked his cinch, his movements deliberate. You ride out of here, you don't come back, Zack said to his back. Rip put his foot in the stirrup and swung into the saddle. He looked at the old man. I'm not riding out. To town, then. Zack faced him. You ride with him, you're against me. I'm not riding with him. Rip gathered the reins. I'm riding in. You can't stop this, Zack said. Maybe. Rip looked at Bernita, then back at Zack. But I'm the only one who can get between you. He kicked the horse hard. The animal limped forward, and he was gone, a cloud of dust heading for Lone Cedar. Sam spat. He's running. Zack watched the dust cloud shrink. No. He picked up the tamping rod. He's not. He slammed the rod into the dirt around the post. Thud. He's just a bigger fool than I thought. Thud. Chapter 7. He cut her off at the fork in the road, the one that led north to the Lazy L and south to the Baxter Spread. Rip spurred his horse through the scrub oak, coming out onto the trail 20 yards in front of her. The paint mare shied, dancing sideways. Bernita hauled the horse back, her hand dropping to the revolver on her hip. "Get out of my way," she said. "I need your help. I told you what I want. Ride out. Zack's coming to town. He'll be there in an hour." Rip kept his horse still, his hands in plain sight on the pommel. "Your father's waiting. They'll meet in the street." "I know." Her voice was flat. "I'm going to try and stop him." "You can't. He's past listening. So is Zack. That's why you have to stop him." Rip kneed his horse closer. She didn't draw, but her hand stayed on the gun. "You said I started this. Said I have to be the one to stop it. This is how." "How?" "You get to your father's house before he leaves. Or maybe he's there now. You get his gun. And do what? Throw it in a well. Reload it." She stared at him. "What?" "Reload it." Rip pulled a cartridge from his vest pocket. He'd spent the last 20 minutes on the ride, making 3 of them. He tossed it. She caught it, looked at it. The lead was gone. The brass casing was crimped over a paper wad. A blank. "You load his gun with those." 6 of them. Her eyes narrowed, the suspicion coming back, hard and cold. "So Uncle Zack can shoot him down like a dog?" "No." Rip's voice was quiet. "Because I'm going to do the same thing to Zack's." She looked from the dummy round to his face. "You're lying." "Why? What do I get out of it?" "Zack's trust. The ranch. Me." She said the last one like a curse. "I don't want any of it." He leaned forward. "I want them alive. They face each other. They draw. Click. Click. Or maybe just bang and smoke. No lead. They stand there looking like fools. The whole town laughs. They get mad, but they're not dead. They go home. You think it's that simple? They'll just go home. It's better than one of them going in a box." Rip gestured at the blank in her hand. "You want your father right, or you want him breathing?" She stared at the useless cartridge. He could see the fight in her, the lifetime of loyalty warring with the cold, terrible logic of what he was saying. "He finds out," she whispered, "he'll never forgive me. He'll be alive to not forgive you." She closed her fist around the cartridge. "How do I know you'll do it? How do I know you'll get to Zack's gun?" "You don't." Rip gathered his reins. "You just have to trust that I don't want to see a man killed. Not even by mistake." "Like Quinlan?" His face went flat. "Yeah. Like Quinlan." She looked down the road toward her father's ranch, then back at him. "If this is a trick, Rip, if you let him die, I will find you, and I will kill you myself." "Fair enough." He nudged his horse. "Get it done." She didn't watch him go. She wheeled the paint mare and spurred it south, riding low and fast. Rip turned his own horse toward Lone Cedar. He had to get there first. Find Zack's horse tied outside the saloon, or at the livery. Get into the saddlebags. Find his rifle, or the pistol he carried. He had 3 more blanks in his pocket. It would take 30 seconds. He topped the rise that overlooked the town. A cluster of false front buildings baking in the noon sun. Main Street was empty, waiting. Then he saw them. 2 riders. Sitting their horses on a bluff half a mile east, where the trail from Kaw Creek came in. They weren't moving. Just watching the town. Watching him. He didn't need to see their faces. Buck Mingo's men. One was short and blocky, the other one thin. Replacements for the men he'd shot at the creek. They were here to make sure the job got done. to make sure Sneed's plan worked. They were here to see a killing. Rip's hand went to the blanks in his pocket. His plan just got complicated. He couldn't walk up to Zack's horse and start rummaging through his gear with Mingo's men watching. They'd know something was wrong. They'd stop him. Or worse, they'd start the shooting themselves. He rode on, down into the town, feeling their eyes on his back every step of the way. Chapter 8. Rip sat his horse at the edge of Lone Cedar. The two riders on the bluff hadn't moved. Blocky and thin. They just watched. He couldn't do it. Not here. He couldn't ride to the saloon or the livery, wait for Zack to arrive, and then start messing with the old man's saddlebags. Blocky and thin would be on him before he unfastened the first strap. Sneed and Mingo wanted this fight. They'd sent watchdogs to make sure nothing stopped it. The plan was dust. He looked east. The trail from the Lazy L wound through the high country before dropping into town. It cut straight through Catclaw Canyon. A narrow split in the rock, barely wide enough for a wagon. If he couldn't get to Zack's gun, he'd have to get to Zack. Stop him on the trail. Reason with him. Or just put his own horse in the way. Rip pulled his horse's head around, easing him away from the main street. He kept his pace slow, casual, like a man checking a fence line. He turned onto the east trail. He kicked the horse into a lope. He looked back. Blocky and thin were moving. They'd come off the bluff, following him, their pace matching his. He spurred his horse. They spurred theirs. They weren't just watching anymore. They were herding him. The mouth of Catclaw Canyon loomed, a dark shadow in the bright sun. A bad place. He reined in, his horse sensing it, dancing sideways. The hell with this, Rip muttered. He turned the horse, ready to make a break for the open plain, take his chances in a running fight. A rifle cracked. The sound bounced off the rock walls, sharp and flat. Not from behind. From above. A puff of dust kicked up 10 feet in front of his horse. A warning shot. Rip looked up. Buck Mingo stood on the canyon rim, leaning on a Winchester. He wore a half-smile. Going somewhere, kid. Rip's hand stayed loose, just above his colt. He looked behind him. Blocky and thin had closed the distance, fanning out to block the trail back to town. He looked ahead. Another rider, one he didn't know, stepped out from behind a rockslide, blocking the trail forward. He was in a box. Smart coming out here, Mingo called down. Saved us the trouble of finding you. Sneed don't like loose ends. I'm not a loose end, Rip said, his voice staying level. I'm the man who got the job done. You got it done, all right. Mingo worked a lever, chambering a fresh round. You also shot 2 of my men. Got sentimental, Sneed says. A man gets sentimental. He gets to talking. We can't have that. Sneed ordered this? Sneed pays the bills. Mingo raised the rifle to his shoulder. Nothing personal, kid. You just cost too much. Mingo fired. The bullet wasn't for Rip. It struck his horse high in the chest. The animal screamed, a sound that was half whistle, half shudder, and its front legs buckled. Rip kicked free of the stirrups as the horse went down, using the 1,000-pound body for cover. He hit the ground rolling, came up behind a wedge of sandstone. A bullet sparked off the rock an inch from his face, stinging his cheek with stone fragments. Blocky and thin were firing now, riding in slow, squeezing off rounds. His horse was dead. He was pinned. And Zack Ledlie was still riding to town. Sneed wanted him dead. The realization hit Rip like a cold spike. He wasn't part of the plan anymore. He was just a piece of string to be cut. He'd started the fire, and now they were tossing him in. He looked left. A game trail. Barely a crack in the canyon wall, a steep scramble of loose shale and rock. Rip poked his head out, fired twice fast. One shot at Blocky, making his horse rear. One at Mingo on the rim, making him duck. The bullets went wide, but they bought him a second. He bolted from behind the horse. He ran for the crack in the wall, his boots sliding on the loose rock. A bullet tugged at his sleeve. Another hit the dirt at his feet. He threw himself at the opening, scrambling, clawing his way up the shale. He heard Mingo shouting, "Get him! Don't let him get up top." Rip kept climbing. His hand closed on a sharp rock, slicing his palm open, but he didn't let go. He hauled himself over the lip, rolling into a patch of prickly pear. He lay there breathing dust, his heart hammering his ribs. Blood ran down his arm from a bullet graze. He looked back down. Mingo and the other three were gathered around his dead horse. They looked up at the ridge, then at each other. "Let him go," Mingo's voice drifted up. "He's on foot, wounded, and 10 miles from nowhere. He ain't stopping nothing." They turned their horses, riding out of the canyon, back toward Lone Cedar. Back to their ringside seats for the main event. Rip stood up, his arm throbbing. He was alive. But he was on foot. And Zack Ledlie was riding to town to meet Mace Baxter, both men carrying guns loaded with lead. Chapter 9. He came in from the east, a ghost covered in dust and dried blood. Rip didn't bother with the trail. He'd half run, half slid down the shale bluffs, cutting a straight line to Lone Cedar that cost him the rest of his good hand, and tore his pants to ribbons. The grazed flesh on his left arm had stiffened, the shirt sticking to the raw meat. He hit the alley behind the livery, gasping, leaning against the rough sawn boards. His lungs burned. He risked a look around the corner, onto Main Street. The town was dead. Noon sun beat the dust to a fine powder. Zack's roan was tied in front of the drover's head. Mace Baxter's black gelding stood 3 doors down, outside the mercantile. They were both here. Rip's eyes scanned, found them. Blocky and thin. The 2 watchdogs. They weren't watching the saloon. They stood outside the land office, sharing a cigar, laughing. The glass window read H. Sneed, Regional Development. As Rip watched, the door opened and Buck Mingo stepped out. He clapped Blocky on the shoulder, said something that made the man grin, and all 3 went back inside. They were meeting with Sneed, reporting that the loose end was tied. Rip pushed off the wall. He had no plan. He only knew he couldn't let them stand in that street. He walked out of the alley, his boots unsteady. He crossed the street to the drover's head, his shadow clinging to his heels. He pushed through the batwing doors. The saloon went quiet. The bartender stopped wiping a glass. 2 prospectors at a back table froze, cards in hand. Zack Ledlie sat at a table by the front window, his back to the wall. He had a cup of coffee, untouched. Mace Baxter stood at the far end of the bar, a shot of whiskey in front of him. His hand was 6 inches from the Colt on his hip. Sheriff Brody, a man with a graying mustache and tired eyes, stood in the middle of the room. "Zack. Mace. This is fool talk. Go home." "Stay out of it, Brody," Mace said, not looking at him. "Campbell." Zack's voice was flat. He took in the torn shirt, the blood, the exhaustion. "I told you not to come. He tried to kill me." Rip's voice was a rasp. Zack's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Mace turned from the bar, his hand still resting near his gun. "Another story." "No story." Rip pointed out the window, his cut hand leaving a smear on the glass. "They're in there. Sneed's office. The men who killed Quinlan. The men who just ambushed me in Catclaw Canyon." Zack stood up. Mace took a step away from the bar. "Sneed," Brody said, moving closer. "The land speculator?" He hired me, Rip said, the words spilling out. Hired me to push you two. To get you at each other's throats. He wants the land. He wants you broke or dead. He doesn't care which. Zack looked at Mace. Mace looked at Zack. 30 years of friendship, shattered in days, now hung suspended by this. He hired Buck Mingo's gang to do the dirty work, Rip pushed on, his voice gaining strength. They killed Quinlan when the ambush went wrong. They just tried to kill me because I was a loose end. He ripped the torn sleeve of his shirt, showing the bloody track on his arm. They're in that office right now, getting paid. Mace looked at Zack's gun, then at Rip. You played us. I did. You lied. About everything. About everything. Except them. Rip pointed at the office again. They are real. And they are in there. Sheriff Brody looked from Rip's bleeding arm to the land office. He'd seen enough. Zack. Mace. You stay here. He unholstered his pistol. Deputy? A young man with a shotgun stepped out of the sheriff's office across the street. We're going to talk to Mr. Sneed, Brody said. He walked out of the saloon, the deputy falling in beside him. Rip watched them cross the street. He looked at Zack. The old man's gun was in its holster. Live. Rip's hand brushed the blanks in his own pocket. He'd failed. Zack looked at Mace. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by something cold and weary. Mace. Don't, Mace said. He tossed a coin on the bar for the whiskey. This changes what Sneed is. It doesn't change what you did. Mace, I came here to settle this. I'm settling it. Mace turned and walked out the batwing doors. He stopped in the middle of the street. Zack. Zack looked at Rip, his face a mask of regret. I told you to stay out of it. He followed Mace into the street. No. Rip ran after them, stopping on the boardwalk. Don't you see? This is what he wants. Down the street, Brody and his deputy had reached Sneed's door. Sneed, Brody yelled. Open up. This is the law. Zack and Mace stood 20 paces apart, facing each other, the sun beating down. They ignored Rip. They ignored the sheriff. You're a damned fool, Zack, Mace said, his voice carrying in the still air. I've been a fool for 2 years, Zack said. Time to end it. Both men's hands hovered over their guns. Brody kicked the land office door. The window of Sneed's office exploded. Mingo's rifle poked through the shattered glass. He fired, not at Brody, but at the deputy. The man went down, his shotgun clattering on the boardwalk. Ambush, Brody yelled, diving behind a water trough. A second shot. A third. Blocky and thin appeared at the door, pistols in both hands, shooting at anything that moved. Chapter 10. The deputy's body lay half in, half out of the street, his chest a red ruin. Sheriff Brody was pinned, hugging the horse trough, lead kicking up splinters around him. From Sneed's shattered office window, Mingo's rifle barked again, the slug whining past Zack's ear. The street fight had started, but the duel hadn't ended. Zack and Mace stood frozen in the white-hot dust, their private war eclipsed. Mace looked at the gunfire, then at Zack. His face was a mask of cold rage. He'd come for this. He wouldn't be denied. Zack. He drew. Zack, his instincts 30 years old but still sharp, reacted. He turned from the office, his hand dropping, clearing leather. Rip saw it from the boardwalk. Zack drawing live. Mace drawing on him. No. Rip launched himself off the planks. He hit Zack Ledlie high, a full-body tackle. His shoulder connected with Zack's gun arm. The Colt flew, spinning end over end, clattering into the dust by the saloon steps. Mace Baxter's draw was clean. His target was clear. He pulled the trigger. FWHUMP. A hollow pop. A cloud of white smoke. No recoil. Mace stared at his pistol. The hammer was down on a spent primer. He hadn't felt the kick. Another shot from Sneed's office. Brody yelped as a bullet tore through the trough, soaking his leg. Mace broke the revolver. 6 cartridges fell into his palm. He looked at them. The lead was gone. The ends were wadded paper. He looked at his empty gun. He looked at Zack, who was pushing Rip off him. He looked down the south road, the one his daughter had taken. "Bernita," he whispered. The betrayal hit him harder than a bullet. Out the back, Mingo's voice roared from the office. The land office door flew open. Blocky and Thin burst out, pistols blazing, covering Mingo's retreat. "They're running," Brody yelled, firing his pistol over the trough. Blocky saw Rip in the open. He grinned, raised his gun. Rip was already moving. He'd come to a place he knew. This wasn't ranching. This was work. His draw was a single, fluid motion. He didn't aim. He pointed. He fired twice. The bullets caught Blocky high in the chest, walking him backward. The grin on the man's face turned to a wet cough. He sat down hard, looked at the 2 holes in his shirt, and pitched over. Thin took cover behind a wagon, firing fast, trying to pin them. Zack scrambled for his gun. He got it, thumbed the hammer, and fired at the wagon wheel, sending splinters into Thin's face. Mace stood in the middle of the street, useless, holding a trick gun. He looked at the dead deputy, at the shotgun lying beside him. He ran, scooped up the greener, broke it. Live shells. He snapped it shut. "Rip!" Zack yelled. Rip didn't need the warning. Mingo had appeared in the alley between Sneed's and the Mercantile, Winchester in hand. He wasn't running. He was flanking. Rip fired. The slug tore a chunk from the building's corner. Mingo fired back. The heavy rifle round snapped past Rip's head with the sound of torn canvas. Rip ducked, rolled behind the livery's water trough, came up on one knee. Thin poked his head around the wagon. The boom of the shotgun echoed off the buildings. Mace Baxter, his face black with powder smoke and fury, had emptied one barrel. Thin collapsed, his head and shoulder disappearing in a red spray. Mingo saw it. He saw his crew gone. He saw Zack moving to cut him off. He saw Rip, a ghost he'd left for dead, raising his pistol. Mingo levered the Winchester. Fired. Rip fired at the same time. The rifle bullet tore through Rip's thigh, spinning him around, dropping him to one knee. He grunted, pain a white-hot flash. His own shot hit Mingo in the throat. Buck Mingo dropped the Winchester. He grabbed his neck with both hands, a gurgling, choking sound. He took 2 steps into the street, his eyes wide with surprise. He fell on his face and didn't move. Silence. The street smelled of sulfur and copper. Rip stayed on one knee, his pistol hand resting on his good leg, the gun smoking. Zack walked over to Mingo. Nudged him with his boot. Nothing. He looked at Blocky. At Thin. He looked at Mace, who stood reloading the shotgun, his hands shaking. Sheriff Brody finally stood up, his pistol aimed at Sneed's office. "Sneed. Come out. It's over." "Nothing." Rip pushed himself up, his legs screaming. He holstered his pistol. Zack walked over to him. He looked at the blood soaking his pants. "You're hit." "I'll live." Zack looked at his own gun, still in his hand, then at Rip. "You saved my life." "You were firing live," Rip said. Zack's eyes went to Mace. Mace let the shotgun hang loose. He held up one of the blank cartridges for Zack to see. "She tricked me." "She saved you," Zack said. "She." Mace didn't have the words. He looked at the 3 dead men, then at Rip. You shot them. They started it, Rip said. He limped toward Sneed's office. But they didn't finish it. Chapter 11. The office door swung open, scraped the floor, and stopped. Rip kicked it again. The last hinge gave way, and the door crashed flat, raising a cloud of plaster dust. Hank Sneed was under the desk. Just his boots, and the cuffs of his trousers showed. "Get out, Sneed," Sheriff Brody said, his voice raw. He stood in the shattered window frame, his pistol centered on the desk. "Don't shoot." Sneed's voice was high, muffled. "I'm unarmed, Mingo, he forced me. He's a madman." "Mingo's dead," Rip said, leaning against the doorframe, his legs screaming. "Your whole crew is dead." A long silence. Then the desk scraped as Sneed shimmied out, his hands held high. His face was white with dust, his hair standing on end. He looked at Brody. At Rip. At the street full of bodies. "It was a misunderstanding," Sneed panted, trying to fix his tie. Brody stepped over the windowsill. "Was it a misunderstanding when Mingo shot my deputy?" He backhanded Sneed across the mouth, a sharp, flat smack that spun the speculator around. Brody grabbed him, spun him back, and slammed him against the wall. "Was it?" "No. Brody cuffed him. "You're under arrest, Hank. For murder. For all of it." He hauled Sneed toward the door. In the street, the smoke was clearing. Mace Baxter stood where he'd been, the shotgun broken open over his arm. Zack walked over to him. He didn't look at Mace. He looked at the bodies. Hell of a thing. Mace let the empty shotgun shells fall to the ground. He pulled 2 live ones from his vest and reloaded, his hands steady. He snapped the greener shut. "Yeah. You were right," Zack said. "About him." He nodded at Rip. "I was." Mace didn't look at him either. He looked down the south road. She's got a spine, that girl." Loading my gun. A flicker of something, not a smile but close, touched his lips. "Made a fool of me." "She saved your life," Zack said. "And he," Mace nodded at Rip, "saved yours. After lying to us for a week. He's a complicated man." Mace finally turned to face him. "We're 2 old fools, Zack." "We are." "That water, that fence." "To hell with the fence," Zack said. Mace looked at him. "To hell with it." He offered his hand. Zack took it. They shook once hard, like they were driving a post. Brody shoved Sneed past them, toward the jail. He stopped in front of Rip, who was trying to tie his handkerchief around the hole in his leg. "You," Brody said. Rip looked up. "You shot 3 men." "They were shooting at me," Rip said. "And you." "My deputy's dead. A boy from Up Valley. Name was Tom. He was saving to get married." Brody's face was iron. "This whole war. You brought it here." Sneed's going to talk," Brody said, his voice low and hard. "He'll trade everything he knows. And your name is going to be the first one he says. You lied. You conspired. You're an accomplice to everything, including Tom's murder." "Now wait a minute, Brody," Zack said, stepping up. "You stay out of it, Zack. This ain't ranch business. This is the law." Brody grabbed Rip's good arm. "You're under arrest." "The hell he is." Brody and Zack stared at each other. "He's a hired gun, Zack. Or worse. He just killed 3 men. He saved my life." Zack's voice was a bark. "He saved his life." He pointed at Mace. "He stopped this. He started it." "He's my responsibility," Zack said, his jaw set. "He's not running. He's wounded. And he's coming with me." "You can't do that," Brody said. I'm his new foreman, Rip said, surprising himself. Zack looked at him. Brody looked at him. You what? Brody said. Zack didn't miss a beat. That's right. Hired him this morning. Pete's dead. I need a foreman. He's it. You're vouching for him. I am, Zack said. He'll be at my ranch. He'll be there for your questions. But he's not going in that cell. Sneed is. Brody looked at Zack. He looked at Mace, who'd stepped up beside his old friend. He looked at Rip, bleeding in the dust. He was one sheriff against the two biggest ranches in the valley. Damn you, Zack, Brody muttered. He shoved Sneed. Let's go. He hauled the speculator toward the jail. Zack turned to Rip. Foreman, huh? You said you needed one, Rip said. I need one who can stand up. Zack looked at the blood. You're a mess. He's a con man, Mace said, walking over. And a liar. He's also the fastest draw I've seen since '78, Zack said. And he's got no friends. I can work with that. Let's get you to the dock. Hoofbeats. Fast. They turned. Bernita was at the end of the street, reining in the paint mare, her eyes wide, taking in the bodies. She saw her father, safe. She saw Zack, safe. Her eyes found Rip. He was standing, one hand pressed to his leg, but he was alive. She didn't move. She just stared at him, and the fear in her face was replaced by something else. A small, almost invisible smile touched the corner of her mouth. Rip saw it. He nodded at her. Once. Zack saw it all. Well, that's a problem for another day. He put his arm under Rip's. Come on, foreman. Before you die of stupidity and ruin my streak. Chapter 12. 2 days later, Rip sat on the porch of the Lazy L, his leg propped on a crate. The doc had pulled the slug, stitched him with horsehair, and left him with a bottle of whiskey and a warning about walking. Rip had finished the whiskey. The leg throbbed with a dull, hot pulse. He was cleaning his Colt, the pieces laid out on an oilcloth in his lap. The smell of gun oil and coffee hung in the still afternoon air. Zack Ledlie sat in his usual chair, rocking slow, his eyes on the horizon. Brody sent word. Sneed's talking. Naming names all the way to Denver. Good for Sneed, Rip said, wiping down the cylinder. He also said Sneed asked for a lawyer. Claimed his crew was dead, and he was the last one left. Brody told him Mingo's crew was bigger than 3 men. Sneed shut up. Smart man, Sneed. The rocking stopped. You figure any are left. Mingo wasn't the kind to travel light, Rip said. He had 5 men with him at Kaw Creek before he hired Blocky and Thin. I only killed 2 of them. Math. Zack rubbed his jaw. Math says there's 3 more. At least 2, Rip corrected. I saw a 4th man in Catclaw Canyon. He wasn't in town for the fight. So too. Zack looked out at the valley. Just out there. They're not stupid, Rip said. They hear Mingo's dead. They'll be halfway to Mexico. Maybe. They sat in silence. Mace Baxter rode in, tied his horse to the rail and came up the steps. He nodded at Zack, nodded at Rip. He poured himself a coffee from the pot on the sideboard. Brody's here, Mace said, looking back the way he'd come. And he's got company. Rip tensed, his hand stopping on the gun barrel. Company. Outlaw, Mace said. Different. A moment later, 5 riders came up the ranch road. They didn't ride like cowhands or outlaws. They rode in a tight, disciplined formation, their horses high-strung, silver winking on the bridles. They were all dressed in black, with flat-brimmed hats and charro jackets. Sheriff Brody rode with them, looking uncomfortable. They stopped in the yard. The man in the lead dismounted. He was older, 60 maybe, with a ramrod spine and a trimmed gray beard. He wore a suit of clean black wool, and the grips on his matched pistols were mother of pearl. He took off his hat, holding it at his chest, and walked to the porch. "Sheriff Brody says you are the men in charge of this valley," the man said. His English was perfect, accented but precise. "We're just ranchers," Zack said. "I'm Zack Ledlie. This is Mace Baxter. My foreman, Rip Campbell." The man's eyes, dark and heavy, rested on Rip for a second. "I am Don Rodrigo Salazar. My holdings are in Sonora. 200,000 acres. 10,000 head of cattle." "That's a lot of cows," Mace said. "You're a long way from home, Mr. Salazar." "I am on a hunt." Don Rodrigo did not move. "I am looking for the men who murdered my son." The air on the porch went still. "My son, Miguel," Salazar said, his voice a monotone. "He was bringing a prize bull north to sell in Texas. He was ambushed near the border 2 months ago. They did not just shoot him. They took his money and his life, and they left him for the animals." Rip slid the cylinder back into the frame of his Colt. Click. "My vaqueros found a man," Salazar continued. "One who had been seen with the killers. He was persuaded to talk. He said the men who did it were part of a gang. He said their leader was a man named Buck Mingo." Zack, Mace, and Rip looked at each other. "He said Mingo and his men were riding north to Kaw Creek." Salazar's eyes fixed on Rip. "The sheriff tells me Mingo is here. He tells me Mingo is dead." "He is," Rip said. "And his men? The ones in town?" "Blocky and thin," Rip said. "They're dead too. My man said there were 7. Mingo and 6 others. Not 3. "I killed 2 at Kaw Creek," Rip said. "That makes 5. Don Rodrigo's hand went into his jacket. He didn't pull a gun. He pulled a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Zack. Zack unfolded it. It was a piece of rough paper, a charcoal sketch. 2 faces, drawn with surprising skill. "My man died," Salazar said. "But he gave me this first. The faces of the 2 men who stayed with Mingo after the others. The ones who enjoyed their work." Zack passed the paper to Mace. Mace stared at it, then handed it to Rip. Rip looked at the sketch. One face was thin, rat-like, with a scar on his chin. "I've seen him. In the canyon. He was the 4th man. The one who got away." "And the other?" Salazar asked. Rip studied the second face. Heavy-jowled, dead eyes, a drooping mustache. "Never seen him." "Sneed," Mace said, snapping his fingers. "The water holes. He must have sent that one. Kept him separate." "2 men," Don Rodrigo said, his voice like cold iron. "Still out there. The ones who put their hands on my son." He took the paper back, folded it, put it away. "You have killed their leader. For that, you have my gratitude." He turned, walked to his horse. "Where are you going?" Zack asked. "To find them." Salazar mounted his horse in one smooth motion. His 4 vaqueros moved in around him. "This is our county, Salazar," Brody said, stepping forward. "You can't ride around." "I am not riding around, Sheriff. I am riding through." Don Rodrigo looked down at the 3 men on the porch. "A storm is coming for this valley. These men, they are not just rustlers. They are animals. You have cut the head off the snake. But the body still twitches. And the poison remains." He turned his horse, and without a backward glance, led his men back down the road toward town. Mace watched them go. "Sonora. A long way to ride," Zack said. "Not for a man like that," Rip said, testing the weight of his reassembled pistol. Not when he's not hunting for cattle. Chapter 13. The rider came from the south. He didn't ride like a cowhand, or a Mexican vaquero, or a sheriff. He rode like a man who was paid by the mile and didn't plan on stopping. He was just a shape in the heat for an hour, then a man on a tired buckskin. He rode straight to the porch, stopped, and sat in the saddle looking at the three men. He was in his 40s, with a face burned brown and eyes the color of a washed-out sky. He wore a plain vest, a flat-brimmed hat, and a star. Not a county sheriff's star. This one was a circle. U.S. Marshal. He didn't get down. He looked at Rip. You him? He's who? Zack said, putting his coffee cup down. The marshal ignored Zack. His eyes stayed on Rip, taking in the bandaged leg, the gun on his lap. You fit the description. Left-handed draw. Looks meaner than he is, till he's not. Who gave you that? Rip asked. A man in El Paso. Before I hung him. The marshal swung down from the buckskin. He moved stiff, like a man who'd been in the saddle for a week. He walked up the steps, his spurs quiet. He stopped 5 feet from Rip. I'm Marshal Caleb Stone. You're a long way from El Paso, Rip said. So are you. Stone's hand went into his vest pocket. He pulled out a folded paper. Not a sketch. A poster. He tossed it onto the oilcloth in Rip's lap. Rip didn't have to read it. He knew the words. Zack picked it up. Mace looked over his shoulder. Wanted. For bank robbery and murder. First National Bank of El Paso. $1,000 reward. The name at the bottom was Rip Campbell. Zack looked at the paper. He looked at Rip. His face was stone. Foreman. He was with a crew, Stone said, his voice flat like he was reading a report. Buck Mingo's crew. They hit the bank 6 weeks ago. Killed a guard. Got away with $20,000. We know Mingo, Zack said, his voice hard. He's buried on the hill. My foreman put him there. Is that right? Stone looked at Rip. You killed your boss. He wasn't my boss, Rip said. He was a mistake I made. You made it in El Paso. I made it when I met him. Rip started putting his gun back together. He didn't look at the marshal. I was broke. He offered me a cut for a job. Said it was easy. They're always easy, Stone said. I held the horses, Rip said. I never went inside. Mingo and 3 others went in. I heard a shot. Then another. They came out running, bags in their hands. The guard, he was just a man with a broom. He stepped out, and Mingo shot him. Didn't even break stride. And you? I rode. You ran, Stone said. I ran. Mingo kept the money. I kept my life. Rip slid the cylinder into the frame. He didn't like me running. He figured I was a loose end. A witness. He put my name on the poster. Figured some lawman would do his dirty work for him. And here I am, Stone said. Here you are. Stone looked at Zack. You vouching for a bank robber, Ledlie? Zack looked at Rip's hands, busy with the gun. He looked at the poster. I'm vouching for the man who saved my life. The man who stopped a war. He's also the man who started it, Mace said, his voice a low rumble. You brought this here, boy. All of it. Mingo, the killings. El Paso. It's all your shadow. A man's shadow is a hard thing to shake, Stone said. He turned his flat gaze back to Rip. I heard a story in town. From Sheriff Brody. About Mingo and Sneed and a hell of a gunfight. It's true, Zack said. But it ain't the whole story. Stone looked at Rip. You're telling me you were framed. I'm telling you what happened, Rip said. It's a good story. I hear a lot of stories. Most of them are wind. The marshal walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the valley. Sneed's in the jail. Salazar's in the saloon. Mingo's in the ground. And 2 of his men, maybe 3, are still out there. He turned back. I'm not convinced, Campbell. A man's word ain't worth much when he's got a rope waiting for him. So what now? Rip asked, his hand finally still on the finished gun. You taking me in? Maybe. Stone ran a hand over his jaw. Or maybe I'm just tired. This Sneed, Brody says he's connected. This Mingo, he's got history. And you're in the middle. What's your play, Marshal? Mace asked. I'm going to investigate. Stone's pale eyes settled on Rip. I'm going to talk to Sneed. I'm going to find Don Salazar. I'm going to find out what really happened in that street. He stepped off the porch. A man's framed, he sticks around. A man's guilty, he runs. He put his foot in the stirrup. I'm staying at the hotel, Campbell. Don't make me come looking for you. He rode off, his back straight, leaving the wanted poster on the porch floor between them. Mace grunted. Ghosts. The man's got more ghosts than a graveyard. Zack said nothing. He just watched the marshal ride, his new foreman's life hanging by a thread. Chapter 14. The noon stage from the south kicked up a cloud of dust that settled on everything in Main Street, including the windows of the hotel. Rip Campbell was in the lobby, sitting in a chair that didn't fit him, his bad leg propped on the railing. He'd come to town for cartridges. He'd stayed to watch. Marshal Stone was at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee, looking at a notepad. He'd been looking at the same page for an hour. The hotel door opened, letting in a wave of heat and dust. A woman stepped in. She wasn't from here. She was young, in her 20s, and wore a dark green traveling suit that had been expensive before the dust got to it. She had a hat with a short veil, which she pushed up. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were sharp. She went to the desk. The clerk, a man named Peters who'd been there 20 years, looked up. I'm looking for a room, the woman said. Her voice was clear. East Texas. Austin, maybe. And I'm looking for a Mr. Henry Sneed. Rip's hand stopped. He'd been rubbing his thigh, trying to work the ache out. Stone looked up from his notepad. His eyes were flat, but they were watching. Sneed, huh? The clerk, Peters, leaned on the counter. You're late for that party, ma'am. Sneed's in jail. The woman's gloved hands tightened on the handle of her valise. In jail? For what? Murder, Peters said, enjoying himself. Conspiracy. General trouble. Take your pick. The woman seemed to shrink. Oh no. You a relative? No. She steadied herself. I'm looking for my father. He was supposed to be here. He was meeting Mr. Sneed. Stone pushed his chair back. It scraped the floor. He stood up, walked over, his spurs quiet. He touched the brim of his hat. Ma'am. Marshal Caleb Stone. Who's your father? Arthur Crenshaw, she said. I am Elizabeth Crenshaw. My father is a banker in Austin. He hasn't been heard from in 3 weeks. Crenshaw, Stone said. Never heard the name. He was coming here on business. A land deal. She looked around the dusty lobby, her confusion hardening into something else. Determination. He was supposed to meet me here. He was carrying $20,000. Rip sat up. The chair creaked. Stone's head turned just an inch toward Rip. His face didn't change, but he'd heard it. $20,000. The same amount from the El Paso bank. 20,000, Stone said. In cash. A bank draft, she said. To secure the properties. Mr. Sneed arranged it. Rip stood up, his bad leg taking the weight. He limped over, stopping 6 feet away. Sneed wasn't in the land business, ma'am. She turned. She took him in. The torn shirt from the canyon. The bloodstain on his pants. The gun on his hip. She took a step back, closer to the marshal. And you are? He's Rip Campbell, Stone said. He was an associate of Sneed's. A partner? Her voice went cold. Not by choice, Rip said. My father, Elizabeth said, her voice tight, is a good man. He's meticulous. He wouldn't get involved in whatever this is. What this is, Stone said, is a pile of bodies. Mingo, his crew, a deputy. All tied to Sneed. Mingo, she said, the name sharp. Buck Mingo. Rip and Stone looked at her. How do you know that name, ma'am? Stone asked. She fumbled with the clasp on her reticule. My father, he was worried. The last letter I got. He said the deal felt wrong. He said Sneed was unpredictable. He mentioned the men Sneed kept company with. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter on heavy bank stationery. She held it out. He said Sneed was just a representative. That the real money, the real power, came from a man he called the Colonel. Rip looked at Stone. Stone looked at Rip. And Mingo, she said, her voice trembling. He wrote. Sneed's man, Mingo, is nothing but a hired killer. I fear they are not buying land, Elizabeth. I fear they are stealing it. I'm taking the $20,000 as proof of their conspiracy. I'm bringing it to the law. She looked up, her eyes wide. He wasn't investing. He was investigating. Stone took the letter. He read it. Austin. 3 weeks ago. He folded it. Your father disappeared with $20,000. And Mingo's crew hit the El Paso bank for the same amount just before. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying, Stone looked at Rip, that Mingo and Sneed were playing a very big game. And your father, he stepped right into the middle of it. This letter, Rip said, is proof. Sneed was tied to Mingo long before he hired me. He was tied to this Colonel. It's proof of a lot of things, Stone said. He turned to Elizabeth. Ma'am, I think you're right. Your father wasn't a partner. He was a threat. He put the letter in his vest. And in Sneed's business, threats don't last long. Chapter 15. The jail smelled like old sweat, stale whiskey, and fear. Hank Sneed sat on a cot in the back cell, his fine suit rumpled, his face a mask of pasty stubbled dough. He'd been in there 2 days. It looked like a month. Marshal Stone stood at the bars. Sheriff Brody was just inside the office door, his shotgun held loose. Rip leaned against the wall by the empty cell, his bad leg throbbing. Elizabeth Crenshaw sat in Brody's office, the door open, watching. You wanted to talk, Stone said. Sneed stood up, his hands gripping the bars. I want a deal. A deal, Brody said from the doorway. You're an accessory to 3 murders, Sneed. 4, if we count the deputy. What kind of deal you figure you're worth? I'm worth him, Sneed said, his voice a low, desperate hiss. He's bigger than Mingo. Bigger than all of this. I was a representative. A middleman. A middleman for who? Stone asked, his voice quiet. The Colonel. Sneed said the name like it was a curse. You don't want me. You want him. Rip pushed off the wall. You told me you were the brains, Sneed. At the creek. You said you hired professionals. I lied. Sneed's eyes were wild. I was managing. He gives the orders. Not me. I just found the properties. Stone slid Arthur Crenshaw's letter through the bars. It landed on the cot. Sneed looked at it. He saw the Austin Bank letterhead. He sat down hard. Crenshaw, Sneed whispered. He got smart. He wasn't supposed to get smart. He was supposed to die, Elizabeth said from the office. Her voice cut through the smell in the jail. No. Sneed looked at her. Not like that. I told Mingo he was a problem. That he was bringing the money as proof. Mingo said he'd handle it. And did he? Stone asked. 2 of his men. They handled it. On the trail. South of here. A rat-faced man named Skinner and a big one. Judd. They took the draft. They handled him. Rip and Stone looked at each other. The sketch. Don Rodrigo's men. And the El Paso money? Stone asked. The 20,000 Mingo stole. Mingo's bankroll. Sneed was talking fast now, the words spilling over each other. He brought it to the pot. To fund the operation. The colonel, he said it showed initiative. He liked it. So you didn't just frame Rip, Stone said. You were using stolen money to start a war. It's a network, Sneed said, grabbing the bars again. He's been doing this for years. 3 territories. He finds a place, finds a weakness, a water dispute, an old grudge. He sends me to make offers. He sends Mingo to make trouble. The war starts, the ranchers kill each other or go broke, and he steps in. Buys the land for nothing. Just like he tried with Zack and Mace, Rip said. They were perfect. Sneed's face was flushed. 30-year feud waiting to happen. It was perfect. So where is he? Stone asked. This colonel. Sneed's confidence evaporated. He looked over his shoulder, as if the colonel was in the cell with him. I don't know. Not exactly. He's moving. That's not good enough for a deal, Sneed, Brody said. Wait, Sneed's voice was a squeak. Skinner and Judd. The 2 men who handled Crenshaw. They're all that's left of Mingo's crew. They weren't in the street fight, they were on a job. Poisoning Mace Baxter's water holes. Mace, who had just walked up to the jail entrance, went still. They're riding north, Sneed said, not seeing him. To rendezvous with him. With the colonel. He's coming. He's bringing his own men. To finish this. To wipe out the valley. Where? Stone's voice was a flat, cold slab of steel. I don't know the place, Sneed cried. They have a name for it. The Dry Fork. That's all I know. They're riding to the Dry Fork. Now give me the deal. Stone looked at Brody. Put him in the drunk cell. The one with no window. And take his belt. A deal. Sneed shrieked as Brody pulled his keys. You promised. Stone. You promised. I promised you'd maybe not hang, Stone said, turning his back. I didn't promise when. He walked out into the sun, Rip and Mace following him. He's coming here, Mace said, his voice a low rumble, his mind on the poison. He is, Stone said. With professionals, Rip added. Stone stopped in the middle of the street. He looked north toward the high country. He's not buying land anymore. He's collecting a debt. Chapter 16. Sneed's shriek followed them out into the street. You promised. Stone. You promised me a deal. The slam of the inner cell door cut him off. Mace Baxter stood in the white-hot sun, his hands clenched. He wasn't looking at the jail. He was looking north toward his range. Poison, Mace said, the word a piece of gravel in his throat. He sent men to poison my water holes. Sheriff Brody wiped his face with a red handkerchief. Mace, I can. No. Mace cut him off. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. My land. My water. My men. He walked to his horse, his movements stiff, and untied the reins. He pulled himself into the saddle, his face a mask of cold iron. He rode out, not at a run, but with a speed that promised a killing. The three of them stood in the dust, watching him go. He's a hard man, Marshal Stone said. He's a rancher, Rip said. Elizabeth Crenshaw stepped out of Brody's office, her face pale. So that's it? Sneed talks and it's over? No, ma'am. Stone turned his gaze from Mace to the jail. It's just started. This is bigger than Sneed. Bigger than Mingo. He said. 3 territories, Brody said, shaking his head. He's been doing this game. It's not a game, Stone said. It's a business. It's a system. The Colonel, he's not a cattleman. He's an exterminator. He finds a place like this, a place with a crack in it. A water dispute. An old grudge. A bad winter. He sends Sneed to make it look legal, and Mingo to make it hurt. Sneed found the crack, Rip said, rubbing his aching leg. Mingo drove in the wedge. The Colonel just picks up the pieces. And pays for it with stolen money, Elizabeth said, her voice hard. My father's money. The El Paso money. He used it to fund all this. He used it to pay Mingo to start a war, Rip said. And now, he's coming to finish it. He's coming here, Stone said. He's not buying land anymore. He's collecting. He's cleaning up a bad investment. That means Sneed. That means anyone Sneed talked to. He looked at Rip. That means you. And Zack, Rip said. And Mace. The whole damn valley, Brody said. He looked overwhelmed. I need to send a wire. Get the cavalry from Fort Griffin. You do that, Stone said. They'll be here in a week. The Colonel will be here by tomorrow. Sneed said he's bringing his own men. Not Mingo's rabble. Professionals. Men who don't leave loose ends. Stone paced a step, his mind working. This dry fork. You know it, Sheriff. North of here. 30-40 miles, Brody said. Just a dry creek bed and a line shack. Nothing. No one goes there. They're going there, Stone said. Skinner and Judd. The 2 Sneed named. The ones who handled Mr. Crenshaw. Elizabeth flinched. They're meeting the Colonel, Stone said. That's the rendezvous. That's where the new war starts. Stone stopped. He looked at Rip. Go get Ledlie. Bring him to town. Now. What are you going to do? I'm going to consolidate assets. Stone turned to Brody. Sheriff, you go find the Mexican. Salazar. He's got 5 riders who look like they know how to use those guns they're wearing. Salazar. Brody balked. He's a citizen of Mexico, Marshal. I can't deputize. I'm not asking you to deputize him, Stone said, his voice flat and cold. I'm asking you to invite him to a fight. This Colonel, he's not just coming for a ranch. He's coming for the Windy River. He's already declared war. It's time we decided to fight back. Chapter 17. The first one to see them was a homesteader named Hollis. He was checking his well, 100 yards from his sod-busting cabin. He heard a single shod hoof click on rock. He looked up. 6 riders sat on the ridge, silhouetted against the last purple of the sunset. They weren't cattlemen. They weren't prospectors. They just sat. Hollis wiped his hands on his pants, a knot forming in his stomach. He started for the house. They didn't ride fast. They just appeared. In his yard. They'd fanned out, surrounding the small cabin. A man in a clean, dark duster rode forward. He didn't look like he belonged in the dust. He looked like a clerk from a bank. "This your place?" the man asked. His voice was soft, educated. "It is," Hollis said, his hand near a splitting axe. "Got the deed?" "Deeds are paper," the man in the duster said. He nodded to a man on his left. The man got down. He wasn't carrying a gun. He was carrying a 5-gallon can. He walked to the porch and began to splash kerosene on the dry boards. "Here now," Hollis said, his voice choking. "You can't." "Get your wife," the duster man said. Hollis's wife, a thin woman in a calico dress, opened the door. "Abel?" The man in the duster shot Hollis. He didn't draw. The gun just appeared in his hand. A small caliber pistol. A pop. Hollis fell, his hand twitching, reaching for the axe. The woman screamed. The man shot her. The scream cut off. The rider with the can struck a match, tossed it. The cabin went up with a whoosh. The man in the duster watched the flames for a moment. He turned to a man with a rifle. "Who's next?" "Jorgensen. 3 miles east." "Let's ride," the duster man said. They moved out, 6 shadows against the new fire, leaving the bodies where they lay. The Jorgensen boy was the only one who made it. He'd been in the root cellar when they came. He rode a half-dead mule into Lone Cedar just after dawn, his face black with soot, his eyes empty. He fell off the mule in front of the jail and lay in the dust, just saying one word. Fire. By noon, the town knew. The drover's head was quiet. No one was playing poker. The mercantile was full of men buying cartridges, their voices low, their wives loading supplies into wagons. They were all in the hotel lobby. It was the only place that felt solid. Marshall Stone stood by the window, watching the street. Elizabeth Crenshaw sat on a bench, her hands clasped. Don Rodrigo Salazar sat in a high-backed chair in the corner, his black-clad vaqueros standing behind him, watching everything, saying nothing. Zack and Mace came in together. They'd ridden in from their ranches, their faces grim. Mace had a canvas bag full of dead fish. He dropped it on the floor, in front of Brody's desk. The smell of rot and poison filled the room. "My North Range waterhole," Mace said. "Skinner and Judd. They did their work." "They're gone now," Stone said. "They're not the problem," Mace said. "The Jorgensen boy. The Hollis place. The Millers. All hit last night. All burned. All dead." "Not rustlers," Zack said, his voice flat. "This wasn't Mingo's rabble. This was clean. This was a job." "Professionals," Rip said from the doorway. He was leaning on a new cane, his bad leg stiff. "The Colonel's men." "He's sweeping the valley," Stone said. "He hit the homesteaders first. Soft targets. He's trying to start a panic. He wants the town empty. He wants the ranches isolated." "It's working," Sheriff Brody said, gesturing to the street. "Half the town's packing." "He's making a statement," Salazar said from his corner. It was the first time he'd spoken. "He's telling you the land is already his. You are just trespassing." "He's coming for us next," Zack said. He looked at Mace. "He'll hit the Lazy L. He'll hit your place. He'll pick us off one by one." Mace looked at his old friend. "So we don't be one by one." Zack nodded. "One target. Harder to hit." "My place or yours?" Mace asked. "Mine," Zack said. "The house is stone. Sits high. Good field of fire. We'll have the creek at our back." "My men won't like bunking with Yorn," Mace said. "They'll like being dead a hell of a lot less." Zack looked at his friend. "Mace. We're uniting the ranches. It's not a ranch anymore, Zack. Mace picked up his rifle, checking the action. It's a fort. I'll have my men and the rest of my herd moved by sundown. He and Zack walked out onto the porch. Two old men who'd spent a month trying to kill each other, now planning a war together. Stone looked at Rip. Go with them. What about you? The town, Stone said. The colonel wants it to panic. I'm not going to let it. He looked at Salazar. You sitting this out, Don Rodrigo? Salazar stood up, slow. He ran a thumb over the pearl grip of his pistol. The men who killed my son, the one Sneed named. Skinner and Judd. They ride with the colonel now, yes. That's the word, Stone said. Then I am not sitting, Salazar said. I am joining. Chapter 18. The Lazy L Ranch house looked less like a home and more like a besieged fort. Mace Baxter's wagons were drawn into a half-circle by the barn. His herd, mixed with Zack's, was pushed into the high canyon behind the house, guarded by two men who hadn't spoken to each other a week ago. Now they shared a fire and a jug, their rifles across their laps. The combined ranch crews, 30 men in all, were gathered in the yard. They stood in two distinct groups, not mixing. Mace's men on one side, Zack's on the other. They looked at each other like dogs, sniffing over a fresh kill. Rip stood on the porch, his bandaged leg propped on the rail, a cane in one hand. Zack and Mace stood behind him, a united front. They're coming, Rip said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmuring. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. They're professional. They'll hit the soft targets first. Let us sweat, let us make a mistake. Sam, the lanky hand who'd hated Rip from day one, spat in the dust. So we just wait. We don't wait, Rip said. We get ready. He pointed his cane at the stone barn. You think they'll ride up the main road? You think they'll give you a square fight? We can handle 'em if they do, said Taggart, Mace's foreman, a man with a thick chest and a thicker scowl. They won't, Rip said. They'll come from the creek at night. They'll use the shadows. Or they'll set fire to the north range and shoot you while you're trying to save your cattle. They're not here to rustle. They're here to clear the books. A cold silence fell over the yard. So what's your play, foreman? Taggart asked, the word foreman sounding like an insult. Your cowhands, Rip said. You know how to stand your ground. That's what'll get you killed. He pointed at Sam. You're in the barn loft. A shot comes from the ridge. You fire back. Damn right I do, Sam said. Good. You're dead. Rip let the word hang. You fire back. The man on the ridge sees your smoke. He knows where you are. He and his partner spend the next 10 minutes turning that loft into sawdust. You're dead, and you never even saw the second man. The men shuffled. This wasn't how they thought. So what do we do? Zack asked, his voice quiet, backing the play. You shoot and you move, Rip said. This isn't a duel. This is a rat hunt. And we're the rats. He limped down the steps, ignoring the pain in his leg. He walked into the middle of the yard. Here's the new rule, he said. Nobody fights alone. Nobody shoots from the same place twice. Taggart, your men and 3 of Zack's take the barn. Sam, your crew takes the roof of the main house. We're gonna cut loopholes in the attic. Cut holes? Taggart said, outraged. In the boss's house. He's right, Zack said, his voice final. We stock water and ammunition in every spot, Rip continued, his voice gaining the hard, flat edge he used to have with Mingo's crew. The barn. The house. The root cellar. The bunkhouse. Every spot is a fort. You fire 3 rounds, you roll to the next window. You draw their fire, and the men in the other fort, The bunkhouse, the barn, they take 'em down. You make 3 men sound like 30. You make 'em guess. You make 'em bleed for every step they take. The men looked at each other. This wasn't a fair fight. This was sneaky. That's how outlaws fight, Sam said, his voice a sneer. Yeah. Rip met his gaze. That's how they win. Bernita stepped out onto the porch, a Winchester in her hand. She'd been listening. He's right. They're not fighting for their homes. They're fighting for a paycheck. We are. That's the only edge we have. So use it. Mace Baxter looked at his foreman. You heard him, Taggart. Get your men. Start cutting. The men broke grudgingly, but they moved. Taggart and Sam, forced to work together, started measuring the attic wall. Mace watched Rip. The kid was pointing, directing men to build up a rock wall between the house and the creek, using his cane like a general's pointer. Mace walked over, his spurs quiet in the dust. This shoot and move, Mace said low. Rip didn't look at him. Yeah. This is how they work. Mingo. The professionals. This is how I worked, Rip said. When I was on the other side. They're fast. They're smart. But they're lazy. They want an easy payday. We make it hard. We make it bloody. They'll quit. A man who's paid to fight won't die for free. Mace watched him. The kid was using his past, a past Mace despised, to save their lives. He was still deciding if Rip was trustworthy. He was deciding if he cared. You're a cold piece of work, Campbell, Mace said. I'm the man you've got, Rip said, turning. You're putting your men in the barn. Fine. But you put your daughter in the cellar. She'll be where she's needed, Mace said. She'll be where she's safe. She's my blood kid. She'll be where she's needed. Mace walked away, leaving Rip alone in the yard, the sound of saws cutting into the roof of the house. Chapter 19. Sneed's office was a wreck. The door was off its hinges. The window was a jagged hole. Papers, kicked loose in the gunfight, were scattered on the floor, crusted with dried blood and dirt. Marshal Stone was behind the desk, sifting. He tossed a stack of land deeds onto the floor. Nothing. Just standard boilerplate. Elizabeth Crenshaw stood by the wall, her hands clenched. She'd been there an hour, reading every scrap, her face pale with a cold, controlled fury. He has to be here. My father's name. A contract. Something. Rip leaned against the doorjamb, his bad leg aching. The cane felt useless. He wasn't a man for paper, ma'am. Not for things that mattered. Stone looked up. Zack send you to babysit Campbell? Zack said you were in a rat's nest, Rip said, his voice flat. Figured you might want someone who knows the layout. Elizabeth stopped. She was staring at the floor under the desk where Sneed had hidden. There. Ma'am. The floorboards. She pointed. One's loose. Where his feet were. Stone came around the desk. He knelt, grunted, and pulled his knife. He worked the blade into the seam. The board popped. Underneath was a dark, square hollow. Stone reached in, pulled out a tarnished tin cash box. It was locked. He didn't bother with the key. He put the box on the desk, drew his sidearm, and shot the lock off. The crack was deafening in the small room. The box sprang open. It wasn't money. It was a book. A small black, leather-bound ledger. Stone opened it. The pages were filled with neat, precise script. He ran his finger down a page. Arizona. Colorado. He turned a page. Windy River Valley. Elizabeth stepped forward. Rip pushed off the wall, limping closer. It wasn't a book of numbers. It was a list of names. Ledlie, Z. Weakness, grief, son. Pride. Action, Campbell, infiltration. Baxter, M. Weakness, pride, water. Grudge, Ledlie. Action, Campbell, infiltration. Hollis, J. Jorgensen, P. Miller, T. Weakness, isolated. Action, burnout, professionals. Elizabeth's breath caught. Stone turned the page. Crenshaw, A. Weakness, honest. Investigating. Action, terminate, Mingo, Skinner, Judd. Beside the entry in the margin was a small, neat note, addendum, recovered $20,000 proof draft. Funds diverted to operational bankroll. He was just a line in a book, Elizabeth whispered. She traced her father's name with a finger. Weakness, honest. That's all it was, Stone said, his voice grim. He wasn't a man. He was a problem. The money, it was just a bonus. Rip looked at the ledger, at the cold, clean handwriting. He didn't just steal the money. He recovered it. Like it was his all along. Stone flipped to the back of the book. It looked like a list of assets. Campbell, R. Weakness, sentiment. Baxter, girl. Action, terminate, Mingo. Rip just stared at it. Weakness, sentiment. The bastard had seen it. Sneed or the colonel. They'd seen his hesitation at the creek and signed his death warrant. He looked at Elizabeth. She was looking at him, her eyes clear. They weren't partners. They weren't friends. They were just two people who had ended up as lines in the same killer's book. He found it, Rip said, his voice quiet. He nodded at the ledger. Your father. He found this, or he got close enough. He wasn't just a good man, ma'am. He was a brave one. He was a threat, Elizabeth said, her voice hard, echoing Stone's words. He was a threat to their business. She looked at Rip, really looked at him. You were just a tool to them. Until you broke. Yeah, Rip said. So was my father. She closed the ledger. Marshall. This is the proof. This is what they died for. This is what he died for. Yes, ma'am, Stone said. It is. He called you a loose end, Elizabeth said to Rip. He did. So am I. She picked up the tin box, the broken lock, the ledger. And I'm not going anywhere. Rip watched her. The respect came, clean and sharp, without him even noticing. No, ma'am. I don't think you are. Chapter 20. The drover's head was a tomb. A half-dozen men sat at separate tables, nursing warm beers, their eyes on the batwing doors. Every man in the room was armed. Marshal Stone stood at the bar, talking to Rip. His voice was low, but not that low. It was just loud enough to carry. He wants the book, Campbell, Stone said, sliding a shot glass of water. And he wants you. You're the two things that tie him to Sneed. So he'll send his professionals, Rip said. He rubbed his bad leg. The ones who hit the homesteads. He will. Good. Rip leaned on his cane. I'm tired of waiting. I'm meeting a man from the Denver Post tomorrow. At the creek. He's paying $500 for the story. And the ledger. The bartender, a thin man named Calloway, dropped a glass. It didn't break, but it rattled on the wood. He paled, picked it up, and started wiping it. He wiped it too hard. That's a fool's play, Stone said, his eyes on the mirror watching the bartender. You won't make it to the creek. I'll make it. Rip finished his water. Zack and Mace are moving their herds. The colonel thinks we're all looking north. He's wrong. I'm looking for a payday. He threw a coin on the bar. Tomorrow. Noon. Kaw Creek. He limped out. Stone stayed, finished his drink, and watched the bartender. Calloway kept wiping the same glass. 5 minutes after Rip was gone, Calloway took his apron off, told a barfly to watch the place, and slipped out the back door. Stone smiled. He put his hat on and went to find Don Rodrigo. The sun was a hot copper coin, just touching the western ridge. The air at Kaw Creek was still. The only sound was the water, moving over the same rocks where Pete Quinlan had died. A small fire of cottonwood twigs snapped and popped. Rip sat beside it, his bad leg propped on his bedroll. The black ledger was open on his knee. He looked like a man waiting for a train. He was alone. Or he looked alone. 70 yards up, in a nest of limestone boulders, Zack Ledlie lay with his Winchester sighting down on the fire. Across the creek, hidden in a thicket of willow, Mace Baxter and two of his best men held shotguns. Marshal Stone was downstream, in the mud of the creek bank, flanked by two of Salazar's vaqueros. They hadn't moved or made a sound in an hour. Don Rodrigo Salazar was 50 yards uphill from Zack, higher than everyone. He was alone. He wasn't waiting for the colonel. He was just waiting. A rock clicked. It was a small sound, almost nothing. A lizard, maybe. Rip didn't look up from the ledger. He coughed, a dry, deliberate hack. The man who stepped into the firelight didn't look like a killer. He wore a clean, dark duster, a city hat, and had the soft hands of a clerk. He was the man who'd shot the homesteader, Hollis. "Mr. Campbell," the man said. His voice was soft, educated. Rip looked up. "You're not from the post." "No, I'm not." The man smiled, a thin, dry expression. "The post isn't coming." Two more men stepped out of the shadows. One was thin, with a rat's face and a scar on his chin. Skinner. The other was heavy, jowled, with dead eyes. Judd. Up on the high ridge, Don Rodrigo's hand tightened on his rifle. He'd seen them. "The colonel is a tidy man," the man in the duster said, walking closer. "He doesn't like loose ends. He doesn't like ledgers." "This one's for sale," Rip said. "No, I'm afraid it's not." The man in the duster stopped, 20 feet away. "But we'll take it. As a courtesy. After we've settled your account." He nodded to Skinner. Skinner and Judd fanned out, their pistols coming free. "Give me the book, Campbell," the duster man said. "And we'll make this quick." Rip looked at Skinner. He looked at Judd. He looked at the man in the duster. "You're the one who burned the homesteads." "Business," the man said. "Now the book." You missed one," Rip said. "The Jorgensen boy. He's in town." The duster man's smile faded. "See. Loose ends. They're a problem." He raised his hand. A voice, cold and sharp, echoed from the ridge above them. It was in Spanish. "Para Miguel." A single rifle shot cracked the twilight. It wasn't aimed at the man in the duster. It hit Judd, the heavy man, square in the chest, throwing him back 2 steps before he collapsed. Skinner whirled, firing blind at the ridge. The duster man dove for cover. "Now." Stone's voice roared from the creek bed. The world exploded. Zack's Winchester, Mace's shotguns, the vaqueros' pistols. The trap was sprung. Chapter 21. The trap snapped shut. Zack's Winchester barked from the high rocks. Mace's shotguns boomed from the willows, shredding the brush. Marshal Stone and the vaqueros sent a volley from the creek bank, the bullets thumping into the dirt around the fire. The man in the duster and the rat-faced man, Skinner, dove behind the same limestone wedge Rip had used for a backstop. Lead hammered their cover, chipping white stone fragments that stung their faces. "Left," the duster man yelled over the noise. "Flank them from the creek." He was a professional. He was giving orders. Skinner wasn't. He was a rat. He saw Judd lying dead, His eyes open, and he saw a half-dozen guns all pointed at him. He hadn't signed on for this. The hell with this. Skinner bolted. He didn't run toward the creek. He ran back, scrambling into the dark, narrow canyon he'd come from, away from the fight. High on the ridge, Don Rodrigo Salazar lowered his rifle. He watched Skinner disappear. He didn't fire. He melted back from his perch, his face carved from dark wood. This wasn't a battle. This was a hunt. His hunt. The man in the duster was now alone, and he knew it. He was pinned. He peeked fast, mapping the shots. The shotguns from the willows. The rifles from the rocks. The pistols from the creek. And the man by the fire, the one who couldn't run. The bait. Got him? One of Mace's men yelled, raising up from the willows to get a clean shot. The duster man didn't even look. He snapped a shot from the hip, a single precise crack. The cowhand grunted, a sound of surprise, and dropped his shotgun. He pitched forward, face first into the shallow water, and lay still. "Billy," Mace roared. He emptied both barrels at the limestone rock, a blast of useless, angry noise. The duster man used the sound. He rolled, fast, away from the rock, into a patch of high brush that Stone couldn't see from the creek bed. He was moving. He was flanking. "He's in the brush," Stone yelled. "Campbell, you're right." Rip knew. He tried to get to his feet, but his bad leg folded. He dropped back to a sitting position, dragging himself behind the bedroll, his Colt in his hand. He was a target on a plate. The duster man appeared 20 yards away, a shadow stepping out of the brush. He raised his pistol, calm, methodical. He wasn't rushing. He had the shot. Rip swung his gun, but he was too slow. A shot cracked from the creek bank. The duster man's hat flew off. He froze, surprised. A second shot. This one hit him square in the chest. He looked down at the dark stain, looked at Rip, then fell sideways and didn't move. The shooting stopped. Silence rushed in, broken only by the creek and the hiss of the fire. Marshal Stone stood up from the mud, his pistol smoking. He walked out of the creek bed, dripping water. He stopped over the dead man, nudged him with his boot. He looked at Rip. "You attract a lot of trouble, Campbell." "Comes with the job," Rip said, getting his breathing back. Stone looked at the dead man. He looked at the ledger, lying open in the dirt. He looked at Rip. He didn't say, "I believe you." He just nodded. "Your story, it's getting better." Zack and Mace came out of their cover, their faces hard. They walked to their man in the creek, pulled him out. Billy. Dead. Half a mile away, Skinner was in a box-end gully, clawing at the loose shale, trying to climb. He heard a single boot scrape on rock behind him. He froze. He turned. Don Rodrigo Salazar stood at the mouth of the gully, his rifle held hip-high. He just watched. "Wait," Skinner yelled, his voice a squeak. "I got money. I didn't do it. It was Judd and Mingo. I just watched. I didn't touch him." Don Rodrigo stepped closer. He said nothing. "Please," Skinner whimpered, sliding down the shale. "I can tell you. I can." "You were there," Don Rodrigo said, his voice flat, devoid of anger. "You watched." He raised the rifle. "No." Rodrigo fired. The bullet hit Skinner in the gut. Skinner folded, his hands grabbing his stomach, a terrible wet sound coming from his mouth. Don Rodrigo walked up, ejected the spent shell. He looked down at the man who had killed his son. "He begged," Salazar said, his voice quiet. "Did you listen?" He leveled the rifle one last time. Fired. The rat-faced man went still. Don Rodrigo turned, walking back toward Kaw Creek. Chapter 22. They stood over the bodies in the cold moonlight. The creek talked to itself. Zack nudged the dead man in the duster with his boot. He looks like a bank clerk. He shot like a professional, Marshal Stone said. He was reloading his pistol, his movements economical. Mace Baxter stared at the body of his man, Billy, half in the water. One of ours. For two of theirs. Three, Don Rodrigo Salazar said. He'd appeared from the darkness, a shadow detaching itself from the canyon wall. His rifle was cradled in his arm. Skinner is concluded. That's it then, Zack said, sounding tired. That's Mingo's crew. That's Mingo's crew, Rip said, leaning on his cane. The fire was dying. That's not the colonel. Sneed's a liar, Mace grunted. There is no colonel. Just a dead man in a good suit. No, Stone said. A man like that, the clerk, he doesn't work for himself. He takes orders. A horse nickered from the darkness of the main trail. They all went still. Salazar's vaqueros, who had been gathering the bodies, melted back into the shadows. Stone, Zack, and Mace fanned out, their rifles coming up. They weren't Mingo's rabble. They came in a line, 10 of them, sitting their horses in the open, just outside the ring of firelight. They wore matching dusters and army-issue hats. They carried their rifles in scabbards, not in their hands. They looked like cavalry. One man rode forward. He stopped 30 yards out, his horse a big-boned gray that stood like a statue. The man sat in a military saddle. He was in his 50s, with a straight back and a trimmed gray mustache. His coat was clean. His eyes were pale and calm. He looked at the bodies on the ground. He looked at the men by the fire. He didn't seem concerned. A costly evening, the man said. His voice was precise. Educated. That's far enough, Stone called out. Identify yourself. I am the man who owns this land, the man said. He looked past Stone, his gaze settling on Rip. You must be Mr. Campbell. The one with the sentiment. Rip felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The man had seen the ledger. He's the one, Stone said, his own rifle steady. The colonel. I was, the man said, a thin smile touching his lips. Colonel Elias Thorne, formerly of the 2nd Dragoons. My government and I had a disagreement over the definition of public domain. You're the one who hired Sneed, Zack said, stepping into the light. The one who burned the homesteads. Mr. Ledlie. Thorne's eyes flicked to him. A necessary, if distasteful, clearing of title. Your associates have cost me 3 valuable employees. He gestured at the dead men. A business expense. Irritating, but manageable. You're a long way from the army, Thorne, Stone said. And you're under arrest for murder. Thorne laughed. A short, dry bark. Are you arresting me, Marshal? Or is it Mr. Ledlie? Mr. Baxter? He looked at Salazar. Or perhaps the Mexican contingent. He shook his head. No. You're not. You're standing on my property. You've destroyed my assets, and you are holding my ledger. He gathered his reins. He wasn't afraid. He was annoyed. This is not a negotiation. You have complicated the transaction. I am now forced to liquidate. He looked at the 10 men behind him. They hadn't moved. Sunrise, Thorne said, his voice dropping, all politeness gone. Be out of the valley. All of you. Leave the town. Leave the ranches. Or be burned with them. Your choice. And if we stay? Zack said. If you stay, Thorne said, you will be audited. In full. He turned the gray, slow, presenting his back. He knew they wouldn't shoot. He rode back to his men. They turned, as a single unit, and disappeared into the night. The silence they left was heavy, cold. Mace Baxter let out a breath. Cavalry. He's not a cattleman, Stone said, lowering his rifle. He's a general. And he's got an army. He's not coming for the ranch, Rip said, thinking fast. Not first. He's going to hit the town. Burn it. Burn our supplies. Cut us off. He'll level it, Zack said, his voice grim. Just like the homesteads. Stone looked at Rip. He wants to finish this. He's not running. He's going to burn us out. He turned to Zack. Get back to the ranch. Get your men. Mace, you too. Fortify the house. He hits the town, he'll hit you next. Where will you be? Zack asked. I'm a marshal, Stone said, walking to his horse. He's threatening a United States town. I'll be in it. He'll be alone, Rip said. Don Rodrigo stepped forward. No. He will not. He looked at Stone. This. Colonel. He is the man who paid for my son's murder. My business is with him. He nodded to his vaqueros. We will be in town. Rip looked at Zack. Go. Get Bernita. Get the men. Bar the damn doors. What about you, Foreman? Zack asked. Rip checked the load in his pistol. His leg was on fire, but it didn't matter. I'm a loose end. Time to get tied. He started to limp toward his horse. I'm going with the marshal. Chapter 23. The pre-dawn chill was thin. In the hotel lobby, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and gun oil. Marshal Stone stood by the window, a cup in his hand, watching the black rectangle of the street turn a faint, bruised purple. Sunrise. Rip Campbell sat at a table, his bad leg propped on a chair, the cane leaning against the wall. His Colt was in his lap. He's late. He's military, Stone said. Punctual. He's just starting somewhere else. Don Rodrigo Salazar sat in the corner, his back to the wall, his eyes closed. He looked like he was sleeping. He wasn't. Elizabeth Crenshaw came down the stairs, a Winchester in her hand. She sat on the bench by the door. They're still here, then? They're here, Stone said. A sound. Not a gunshot. A whoosh. A muffled thump. Then another. A man in the street yelled. It wasn't a word. Just a sound of pure panic. Stone was moving before the yell finished. He kicked open the lobby door. The livery wasn't there anymore. It was a column of orange fire reaching for the sky. As they watched, a second whoosh came from the mercantile. The front window blew out, followed by a sheet of flame. Kerosene, Rip said, grabbing his cane. They're not coming in, Stone said, his face illuminated by the new fire. They're burning us out. A rifle cracked from the roof of the bank. Sheriff Brody, who had stepped out of his office, was slammed back against the door, a red flower blooming on his chest. He slid down the wall, leaving a wet smear. Sniper! Stone yelled, hauling Brody's body inside. They're on the roofs, Salazar said, his voice calm. He and his vaqueros were already moving to the back of the hotel. They're trapping the rats. The hotel lobby was bright as day, the light from the burning mercantile flickering. Smoke began to curl under the door. He's burning the horses. Burning the food. He's going to gut the town and leave us in the middle, Stone said. Then we don't stay in the middle, Rip said. He limped to the back door, where Salazar stood. Out the back. We take the alleys. This ain't a fight, Campbell, the hotel clerk Peters said from behind the desk, his face white. It's an execution. Not yet, Rip said. He kicked the back door open. 10 miles away, the sky to the south glowed a faint, angry red. Zack Ledlie stood on the roof of the ranch house, a spyglass to his eye. He's doing it. The bastard is burning Lone Cedar. He hit the town, Mace Baxter said from the yard below. He's trying to draw us in. Don't take the bait. I'm not, Zack said. I'm. A muzzle flash, small and sharp, from the rocks above the creek. A man in the barn loft screamed, a high, thin sound, and fell. Contact, Mace roared. Barn. North side. A second shot. A third. They weren't hitting the house. They were hitting the outbuildings, trying to draw fire to see where the guns were. Shoot and move. Bernita Baxter was in the attic, by the loophole they'd cut. She watched the dark. She saw a shadow detach itself from the rocks. A man, low, crawling, a torch in his hand. He was heading for the root cellar, where they'd stored the water. She didn't call out. She rested the Winchester on the sill. Squeezed. The rifle bucked. The shadow dropped the torch, which sputtered in the dirt. He didn't get up. A bullet thwacked into the adobe, an inch from her face. A second sniper. She didn't fire back. She rolled, just as Rip had said, to the next loophole, 10 feet away. The second sniper, thinking he had her pinned, raised up from behind a cottonwood to get a better angle. From the barn, Taggart's rifle cracked. The sniper spun and fell. Zack watched it all from the roof. Hold the line. We make 'em pay for the ground. Bernita was already back at the first window, her eyes scanning the dark, reloading. Main Street was an inferno. The Mercantile was collapsing on itself, sending a wave of sparks into the air. Rip, Stone, and Salazar's men were pinned in the alley behind the drover's head. 2 of Thorne's professionals were on the roof of the bank, firing at anything that moved. He left 6, maybe 8 men here, Stone panted, reloading. Just enough to set the fires and shoot anyone who ran. We can't stay here, Rip said. The heat was blistering. We're cooked either way. We go. We go now, Don Rodrigo said. He pointed at his 2 men. The roof. Go. The vaqueros moved, scaling a rain barrel, flowing up the side of the saloon like cats. The rest of us, Salazar said, draw their fire. He stepped out, firing his pistol at the bank roof. Stone was right behind him. Rip limped out last, his cane useless. He leaned against the wall, raised his Colt. A window above the assay office opened. It wasn't a sniper. It was Peters, the hotel clerk. His face was black with soot. He had a shotgun. It's our town, you sons of bitches, he screamed. He fired both barrels at the bank roof. The blast was deafening. One of the snipers stood up, clutching his chest, and toppled over the edge, landing in the street with a wet, heavy sound. That's when it broke. The blacksmith, a man named Harl, kicked open his shop door, a buffalo rifle in his hands. 2 prospectors started firing from the hotel's upper windows. They were scared. They were missing. But they were firing. The town's waking up, Stone said, a grim smile on his face. Salazar's vaqueros appeared on the saloon roof. They opened up on the last sniper, their pistols firing in a quick, deadly rhythm. The man was hit, tried to crawl, and then was still. The shooting from the roofs stopped. They're on the ground, Stone yelled. They're running for the alleys. We don't let 'em, Rip said. He pushed off the wall, his bad leg dragging, and started for the street. We don't let 'em regroup. He, Stone, and Salazar moved out of the alley, 3 men walking into a street that looked like hell. The citizens of Lone Cedar were in the doors, in the windows, in the smoke. The colonel's men were caught. Here is Chapter 24, following the outline and established style. Chapter 24. The battle for Lone Cedar was fought in the alleys, in the smoke. The blacksmith, Harl, caught one of the colonel's men trying to break into the back of the feed store. He didn't use his rifle. He used the hammer in his hand. Don Rodrigo's vaqueros moved like ghosts, clearing the rooftops, then dropping to the street, 2 men to a team, flowing around the burning wagons. It was a rout. The professionals weren't professionals. They were just hired guns, and they hadn't been hired to fight a whole town. Then came the hoofbeats. Not running. Walking. 10 riders, coming out of the smoke at the south end of Main Street, their forms wavering in the heat from the burning mercantile. The sporadic shooting stopped. The townsfolk, the vaqueros, they all went still. Colonel Elias Thorne sat his gray horse, his military coat unbuttoned, his face calm. He surveyed the scene. His burning town. His dead men. His plan turned to ash. He looked at the bodies. He looked at Stone, at Salazar, and then his gaze settled on Rip, who stood leaning on his cane by the horse trough. "Untidy," Thorne said. His voice carried, clear and sharp, over the crackle of the flames. "Extremely untidy, Marshal." "It's over, Thorne," Stone said, his pistol held steady. "Your men are dead, or gone. You're done." "An investment is never done," Thorne said. "It is re-evaluated." He looked at the men behind him. They were not the same as the ones who'd burned the homesteads. These were harder. They wore old army belts and faces that had seen worse than this. "You've scattered my assets," Thorne said. "I'm here to consolidate." He made a small motion with his gloved hand. "Flush them." His 10 men dismounted. They didn't fan out. They moved in pairs, military style, using the burning buildings for cover, advancing up the street. They ignored the townsfolk. They were here for Stone, Salazar, and Rip. "Back." Stone yelled, firing at the nearest pair. "Get in the buildings." The street erupted. Salazar and his men dove behind the assay office. Stone took cover by the jail. Rip just stood there. His leg wouldn't let him run. Colonel Thorne dismounted, slow. He pulled a long-barreled dragoon revolver from a holster on his saddle. He walked forward into the middle of the street, ignoring the bullets snapping past him. The firelight played on his face. He was smiling. He was walking toward Rip. "Mr. Campbell," Thorne called, his voice calm. "The loose end. There's sentiment. You've cost me more trouble than a whole regiment of Apache." He stopped, 30 paces away. He raised the heavy revolver. Rip let go of the cane. It clattered on the boardwalk. He stood on his one good leg, his hand trembling, not from fear but from the strain. "You talk too much," Rip said. Thorne fired. He was fast. Not a flashy draw, but a smooth, practiced motion. The bullet was aimed center mass. Rip's bad leg, the one Sneed's man had given him, chose that moment to buckle. He wasn't dodging. He was falling. The bullet snapped the air where his chest had been. It tore through the wood of the trough behind him. Thorne's smile faltered. He cocked the hammer. Clumsy. Rip was on the ground, in the dirt of the street, his leg twisted beneath him. He was a perfect target. He was desperate. He didn't aim. He brought his Colt up and fired, fanning the hammer, 3 shots, fast as he could pull. Crack. 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 The first shot was wild, kicking up dust at Thorne's feet. The second hit the dragoon revolver in Thorne's hand, a 1 in 1,000 shot. The gun flew, spinning, its grip shattered. The third bullet hit Thorne in the gut. Thorne looked down, his hand grabbing his stomach. He wasn't angry. He was surprised. He looked at Rip, a half-broke outlaw, firing from the ground like a piece of math that didn't add up. "Damn," Thorne said, his voice a surprised grunt. He tried to draw his sidearm, a smaller pistol. Rip had already cocked his gun for the 4th shot. He took his time. He aimed. He fired. The bullet hit Thorne in the chest, throwing him back a step. Thorne sat down. Hard. He looked at the fires. He looked at his men who had stopped, frozen, watching him. He looked at Rip. Untidy, he whispered. He fell sideways into the dust. For a second, the street was silent. Then one of the colonel's men, the professionals, yelled, "He's down. The boss is down." He wasn't loyal. He was paid. The paymaster was dead. He bolted for his horse. The others followed. They weren't soldiers. They were a payroll. They ran, scrambling for their mounts, firing blind as they galloped back into the smoke they'd come from. Stone and Salazar stood up from behind their cover. They watched them go. They let them. The street was quiet, save for the roar of the burning livery. Rip was still in the dirt, his pistol smoking. Stone walked over, reloading his gun. He looked at Thorne's body. He looked at Rip. "You're a hell of a mess, Campbell," Stone said. He was experienced, Rip said, his voice a rasp. But he stood too close. Chapter 25. The sun came up on a valley that had been bled. In Lone Cedar, the air smelled of ash and wet charred wood. Marshal Stone sat in Brody's office, what was left of it, a stack of papers in front of him. They'd come from Colonel Thorne's saddlebags. Rip was there, his leg bandaged clean, a cup of coffee in his hand. Elizabeth Crenshaw stood by the window, her valise at her feet. Stone picked up a folded paper. El Paso Bank. A letter from Mingo to Thorne. Bragging. He read, his voice flat. "Guard was a fool. Framed the kid I hired to hold the horses. He'll swing for it if he's ever caught." Stone looked at Rip. He picked up the wanted poster from his desk, the one with Rip's name on it. He tore it in half. Then he tore it again. "You're cleared, Campbell. The wire's already gone out." He sifted through the papers again, pulled out a bank draft. Miss Crenshaw. She took it. $20,000. Her father's name. It was in his paybox, Stone said. He never even cashed it. He just kept it, she whispered, tracing the signature. A trophy. She folded it, put it in her reticule. "I'm taking the morning stage. I have a bank to run." She looked at Rip, then at Stone. "Thank you for the ledger." "Your father was a good man, ma'am," Stone said. She nodded once and walked out. Don Rodrigo Salazar was already in the street, his men mounted, their horses fresh. He saw Rip and Stone, and rode over. He touched the brim of his hat. "Marshal. Mr. Campbell." "You're leaving?" Stone asked. "My business is concluded." He looked south, toward Sonora. "My son, he is at peace." He nodded, a final, formal gesture, and led his men out of the ruined town, not looking back. Stone watched them go. Headed home. He looked at Rip. "Sneed's on a prison train to Yuma. Life. I'm headed to Denver. Got a lot of paper to file on a dead colonel." He put on his hat. "You?" "I'm employed," Rip said. "Foreman." Stone almost smiled. "You're a hard man to kill, Campbell. But you're a worse liar. Try to stay out of my paperwork." He offered a hand. Rip shook it. Stone mounted up and rode north, leaving Rip alone in the ashes. He rode back to the Lazy L. He found them on the porch, just as they'd been, it seemed, a lifetime ago. Zack Ledlie and Mace Baxter sat in their chairs. A bottle of whiskey sat on the table between them. They weren't talking. They were just sitting. The 30 years of friendship had settled back in, comfortable as old leather. Rip limped up the steps. Mace poured a third glass, pushed it toward him. "Heard you're a free man." "Heard the same." Rip took the glass. "Heard you're also out of a job," Zack said, his eyes on the horizon. Marshall Stone is recommending the U.S. government annex Thorne's land. Sneed's 2. Putting it up for auction. We're buying, Mace said. All of it. We? Rip asked. Me and him, Zack said. Baxter and Ledlie. Got a nice ring. Sounds like a bad law firm, Mace grunted. He drank his whiskey. Thing is, it's too much land. Too much for 2 old men with bad tempers. We need a third, Zack said, finally looking at him. Someone to run the books. Someone who knows the other side of the business. Rip looked at the glass in his hand. A partner. It's a job is what it is, Zack said. You'll take 30%. And you'll earn it. Rip drank the whiskey. It burned, but it was a good burn. All right. Good, Mace said. Now get out of here. We're busy. He found her at Kaw Creek. The place was quiet. The water ran clear over the stones. The bullet scars on the rocks were the only sign of what had happened. Bernita was sitting on the bank, skipping stones. She didn't look up when he approached. Heard you're a partner, she said. Heard the same. He sat next to her, the ache in his leg a dull, familiar throb. So you're staying? For good. Looks like it. She tossed another stone. It skipped 3 times. You're a liar. A con man. You got my father and my uncle almost killed. I did. You got Billy killed. Yeah. She turned, her eyes clear hard. You're also the only reason any of them are alive. It's complicated. I'm complicated, he agreed. Good. She looked back at the water. I don't like simple men. He sat there for a minute, the silence of the valley settling around them. He didn't have a plan for this. He didn't have a ring. He just had a job, a bad leg, and a future he hadn't planned on. Bernita, he said. She stopped, a stone in her hand. I'm not a good man. But I'm trying to be. I know, she said. This ranch, it's not enough. Not without. She waited. You're going to have to ask, Rip, she said, not making it easy. So he did. Right there on the banks of the creek where the war had started, and where the peace had finally, truly begun. She smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her really smile. She tossed the last stone. All right. Want to listen to over 100 Wild Western audiobooks free? Check out my YouTube channel. The end.